Okay, it is 7 o'clock. We have a lot to cover tonight. Looks like we have quorum. So I'm going to call this regular board meeting to order on August 24th. If you're a member of the public, if you don't mind muting your phone or your computer, that'd be great. And let's stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge of allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Kelly, you want to call roll call, please?
Mr. Case Layout.
Here.
Flynn.
Delayed.
Stadler.
Here.
Mr. Singh.
Here.
Mr. White.
Here.
Mr. Wolf.
I think that's him. That phone is him.
I see him. Is Betterbid?
I'm here.
Ms. Betterbid is here.
Here.
Sure.
Here. Thanks. Can I have a motion to adopt changes to the order of the business on the agenda, please?
So moved.
Second.
Anthony seconds.
Anthony. Are there any comments or questions about this? This is because we have not yet amended policy 2350, so it doesn't quite follow the order that is in our policy. Are there any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Houston's still off, right? So passes 7-0. Okay, I'm going to open to the public. If you can, say that you'd like to speak in the chat. If you are not able to do that because you're on a phone, you're welcome to ask to speak. Is there anyone, or you can raise your hand. Is there anyone who would like to speak? Karen Greena? You're welcome to speak. Karen, can you hear me?
Does someone have to unmute her, or she's got to unmute herself?
I think she can unmute herself.
I'm trying to unmute her and it's not working. She has to unmute herself.
Okay. Little feedback. Can you hear me?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Hi. My name is Karen Green. I'm the president of the Beacon Association of Office Personnel, and which consists of all the clerical staff in the buildings. I have a question that relates to the health and safety of both staff and students. Since March, my number one concern was for the safety and health of members of the BAOP. And now as the reopening date draws near, my question is regarding travel. Is there any guideline or policy from the district for staff members that have traveled to or will maybe still be traveling to one of the flag states or countries? And if the travel occurred or will occur, these people, they're supposed to quarantine. I believe it's 14 days. It may have changed to 10. Just wondering what the status is as far as possibly a questionnaire, how the district is handling it. And teachers, we know they've been off, perhaps they've been traveling. So that's my one question. And also the students, you know, they possibly could have been traveling as well. And what if we know of someone that's traveled to one of these states and has not reported it and came back to work? And last question, I promise, is what about the taking of temperatures for employees? And some have been we know they've been in the buildings working for months. And will a process be put in place now, or are we going to wait until students and teachers return to buildings? That's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Karen. We'll try to answer your questions as we continue to get policy out. Is there anyone else who would like to speak? Okay, seeing none, I'm going to move on. We have 3 workshops tonight. Our first is Dr. Richard Hooley from BOCES. Richard.
Greetings. Thank you for having me. And I appreciate that Zoom is a little difficult, so I won't drag on like I sometimes can. I really just have 3 things to do. I started a couple of years ago coming out to school districts, meeting with the board and just talking about updates at BOCES. And this year, that's really all I'm here for, is to give you a few updates. So if you have the opportunity to drive north and drive past the BOCES campus on Salt Point Turnpike, you will be amazed. We have moved so much earth, it looks like a whole different place. But the work has begun with the construction project, and we thank you for that. And if you have any questions as you drive around, let us know. We have also posted pictures on the website. And when our students come back to class, we are going to use our students in the video class to take some time-lapse photography from this point forward. So we're very excited. You'll remember we haven't had a major capital project in 60 years, and it is going to be a little rough with everything going on, but it is certainly moving along. I like to, at this time of year, also just share with you the numbers of students you have in our different programs at BOCES, just for board members to keep it in mind. So for Beacon, in our alternative high school and our SBC, which is our K-8 center for students with challenges in behavior and IEPs. We also have in-district classrooms. These are classes run by BOCES teachers, but they're placed in the Arlington School District, the Spagin-Kill School District, and the Red Hook School District. So in our alternative high school, we have 2 Beacon students. In our Salt Point Center, our K-8 center, we have 17 of your students. We have 3 Beacon students placed in in-district classrooms in one of those 3 school districts. And then we have 5 students from Beacon who are served by itinerant teachers. Itinerant teachers are BOCES employees who come out to provide related services. Sometimes it's students who are hearing impaired, or it could be OT or PT if that's needed and you're not able to provide it. For a total of 27 students in those alternate and special programs. In our career and tech program, we have a total of 51 students. We have 2 in plant and animal science, 4 in computer tech, 1 in computer networking, 6 in construction trades, 5 in cosmetology, 7 in culinary arts, 6 in graphic design, 4 in health occupations, 3 in nursing assistant, 4 in security and law enforcement, 2 in small engine technology, 3 in trade electricity, 3 in TV and video production, and 1 in our welding and fabrication programs. So I just wanted to give you that update for your information. And anytime you have questions about that as members of the board, please pick up the phone and call me or ask Matt, and he can get a question to me, and I'll be happy to answer your questions. I also wanted to just note that we've had a couple of new hires that might affect our services or that you should know about. Our first is a woman by the name of Becky Green, who has worked at BOCES for a number of years. She used to be in the Educational Resources Department and did a lot of training for teacher and principal evaluation. Just has a wonderful background, and she has taken the position as the assistant principal at the Career and Tech Institute, which was vacated by someone who took a job in another school district really last year. So this position has been open for a while, and we're happy to finally fill it. Another find for us is a woman by the name of Carol Matthews, who is our data privacy specialist. You're probably well aware of the compliance issues with 2D, and this is a person who's going to provide support for us, and I think we share her with some districts. And then finally, we have a gentleman named Terrence McKenna, who was a teacher in the city, and he is going to work with our educational resources, which is really our professional development arm, and his area of specialty is science, and that position was vacated by retirement. And with the changes in the science curriculum, we really felt like we needed to have somebody there to support teachers around the county. And unless you have questions, that's my report, and I'll let you get on with your meeting, but I'll certainly be happy to answer a question or two.
Are there any questions for Richard?
Anthony?
Yeah. How's the BOCES been dealing with COVID? Especially something like a welding class, which I don't know if you can do remotely.
Yeah, well, we are, like you, we are going to have hybrid classes. So we'll be back in school 2 days a week. It was certainly difficult in the spring, I think for everybody. I think many people didn't have a lot of understanding about how to do remote learning well. We've spent a lot of time, and we will spend a lot of time before we open completely with training teachers and how they can do that. But part of our interest in being a hybrid model is, if you think of who our students are, being in person is kind of important, whether those are students with IEPs or kids who are trying to get hands-on training. Some of it you can do at home, but welding is kind of the poster child for one that you don't really want kids welding at home if you can avoid it. But some of the things like cosmetology and culinary, I think we've had an easier lift. But you know, and like you, maybe we will look at revising our plan a month into it. So if things are going well and we're able to keep the virus at bay, maybe we'll have more than 2 days of in-person instruction. That's kind of my hope right now.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Richard?
Okay.
Are the numbers pretty consistent this year from other years from Beacon?
We've had, of course, we're like you. We don't know how many are actually coming back, even though they're signed up. So that's more of an issue for us. We've had a slight decline in career and tech, but we have a good number in our alternative and specialty. So we're optimistic, and I think if we get a vaccine and we can be back to normal maybe next year, I think that'll certainly be a help. I just want to wish everybody a happy new year, happy new school year when you open. And again, if you ever have any questions, we're here to help, and you can pick up the phone and give us a call.
Thank you so much, Richard.
Okay,
Take care.
thank you.
Our next workshop is from Matt with an update about reopening.
Hey, good evening, everyone. Just to piggyback on Dr. Hooley's presentation, we tried to, we'll get to this a little bit later, but we tried to create we tried to create a model that that for the high school kind of mirrored the BOCES hybrid schedule, so students would be able to do both if they needed to. So So anyway, I am going to just do an update on reopening. And all right. Tonight, I am just going to give an update on where we are with reopening. Some of this, or a lot of this, was shared on Friday with the community, and I go into a little greater detail on some of the scheduling issues tonight. And then, and again, like all the previous updates, talk about next steps. So, so Mike, if you're there, if you want to put the slides up, and I'll start. All right. So we, most importantly, are continuing with our plan to offer a hybrid model and an all virtual learning model for our students. We asked for families to make a choice between those two options for their students, for their children. And at today, we have about 90% response rate, which is great. And so people have asked about people who don't respond, and do they just get like automatically assigned to something? We actually are going to spend the next week and probably some days reaching out to families so we don't have to just assign someone to something. We want to hear from all families. So we're getting closer to 100%. But with those responses, it stayed pretty much the same during this whole time. We have about 65% of our families choosing the 2-day hybrid model, and about 35% of our families choosing the all remote virtual model. I think it's important to point out, or a lot of people have been noticing, especially the last week or two, that many districts in the region, not all, but many districts in the region are starting with an all remote instruction model, most of them until sometime in October. And for what I like to say, a variety of reasons, because each district, I think, has their own unique reasons for this, and I'm not an expert in what led to the decision making for all the different districts. Some have just listed needing more time to prepare for in-person instruction. Essentially, that's probably the most common reason. So I think it's important to just take a moment and talk about sort of why we're continuing on our path, and so a few reasons why. One, we started, many of us, especially on the administrative side, started working on reopening planning back in early June as we tried to wrap up last school year. Some of the ordering and whatnot, I think some districts have had issues with ordering needed supplies. Some of the things that we felt we needed for reopening, we ordered back then. So we have our PPE for this school year. We have digital touchless thermometers. We have the supplies, hand sanitizer, etc. So we have the supplies that we need to start the school year. More importantly, I think it's important if we believe in our plan and we feel ready to do it. I feel like many of our students benefit from in-person instruction, and so when I say many, I mean sort of through all levels, through all ages, kids who are general education students, kids who receive special education services, ENL students, that's English as a new language, et cetera. And so for all the different students who would really thrive with at least some in-person instruction, we have felt at our level that it's really important to try to provide it, and to try to provide it as close to the beginning of the year as possible. So so that has really guided our planning, and so just in terms of the status in Dutchess County, There's 13 districts in Dutchess. 8 of the districts are now doing sort of a postponed in-person start with a starting all virtual or remote. 5 of the districts, including us, are still trying to bring students in the month of September. And each of us are doing it a little bit differently based on our individual, variables as a district. But it looks like those 5 are still continuing with their planning as well. So the 5 of us are now talking a lot and discussing things. And again, whether this means anything or not, Beacon is the largest district in Dutchess County that is working on bringing students back in September in person, or at least some of our students. So it goes without saying probably, and this is not a complaint or being whiny, it is just feels like a statement of fact at this point that this is without a doubt some of the most complex work that I've ever been involved with in my career at any level that I've been in. And so every single day we spend hours on specific topics trying to get our protocols and procedures straight for the coming weeks. And so because of that, and because of us trying to get input into our process and feedback into our process, there's still some things that we're working on, especially on the instructional side. But our hope is that we can have most of the instructional, at least the structure of the instructional planning done by the end of the week. You can hit the next slide. So I just want to remind folks about some calendar stuff, and some of this is a little bit of a change from the last time we talked. So we are moving, we typically start the school year with 2 professional learning days for teachers and staff. We've taken 2 that happened during the school year and we've moved them to the front of the year, just feeling like we need as much time as possible for a lot of different reasons. And so, so we're not really going to start bringing students back until September 10th and 11th. On those 4 professional learning days, we're going to focus on a variety of tasks. Teachers are going to have time to plan. We're going to be doing safety and health training. We're going to be doing training in technology and remote learning. And we're also going to be introducing at least some of our groups of teachers into some of the curriculum work that we're doing around diversity and equity. And finally, we're going to be spending time, and this is probably the most important part, we're going to be spending time really talking and learning about ways to socially and emotionally support our students who are either returning to us in person or returning to us remotely, whatever the case. There's quite honestly a lot of trauma that's occurred in our country and our community over the last 5 or 6 months, and we want to make sure that we are all prepared to deal with the level of anxiety and concern that our students have. So September 10th and 11th, that's a Thursday and a Friday. We're calling them orientation days, and principals are working on the schedule for these days. At the middle and high school, they are going to be focusing primarily on 6th and 9th graders and also new students to the building. This is going to be very scheduled and structured. It is not going to be just show up sometime during these days to get a tour of the building. Obviously, it's very scheduled and structured because we need to monitor the number of students in the building. We need to make sure that we're doing it safely. At the elementary level, the elementary principals are planning, hopefully if the weather cooperates for us, a lot of outdoor meet and greets on the grounds of their school for all classes. And sometimes it's a time for parents or families to drop off supplies. Definitely a time to meet the teacher in a socially distant manner, but it's a time to kind of start the relationship building process. I received a lot of questions about whether students who are doing the remote virtual option will have orientation as well, and they will. And if they want to have an in-person orientation, we will provide for that. Excuse me. So it may happen during those 2 days. The principals also asked just for the, sheer number of students that will need orientation, that they're able to do some of that orientation over the course of the first full week of school as well. So that's fine with us, but we want a number of parents asked, especially who chose the remote virtual option, that can their children meet teachers in some sort of safe or outside way, and we're going to work to try to do that as well. So the first week of instruction implementation is the week of September 14th. That's when we'll begin the full remote model as well. So this is a change. I've been thinking about I talked about complexity. We've been thinking about the complexity of what we're doing that week and bringing our students in, and even our staff will have been in for a while. And so we think it's important we have 2 hybrid groups, the blue group and the gold group, that week those groups only come in for 1 day each, and that the day after that, September 15th and 18th, will be all remote for all students, but also give us a chance to at length debrief with our staff to just see what worked, what needs to be improved for the next time students come. We really want to, I've noticed districts that are opening in September, they're all doing this a little bit differently, but they all have sort of the same intent, that they want to try to go slow and make sure that they are, just getting those procedures, routines, making things feel comfortable and safe for the students, and taking their time. And so we want to do that too. So that that is our proposal for that week. Next slide, please. So just some updates about the 3 levels. The elementary, we're going to talk about elementary first, and then middle school and high school. So I first want to say that the elementary work is still a little bit of a work in progress, and we hope to have it really firmed up by Wednesday of this week. So part of I wouldn't even call it a delay. I'd just kind of call it part of our journey. But some of the things that we were working on are what caused us to still be working on it. Were a few factors. One, that we got the guidelines from the state in the middle of July. We immediately started working on them. But part of also what guided our planning for this is just trying to figure out the number of students choosing each option, and which students were choosing each option, because that impacted things as well. So what I can update about and I should also say this, with all of our models, we really try to be guided by a few things. One is that we felt it was important to have a sense of equity between the students choosing the hybrid model and the students choosing the remote virtual model. I've said all along that one of my goals is to try to keep the district together and as a whole as possible during a predictably challenging year ahead of us. And so we wanted to make sure that these models felt equitable. We've also talked to a lot of teachers about what they think might work and what might not work. And I think probably the biggest concern of teachers, and this is something that districts are all approaching a little bit differently. And so this is, I'll be talking about how we're approaching it. But one of the things you see out there is, why don't you just film the class for the kids at home? And so probably the number one concern of our teachers at all levels was the difficulty of doing that, with either the way they run their classroom, or just the way they teach, or the way the classroom is set up, and that might not really be giving the students choosing the remote option the best instruction. And so I think that feedback came from a really good place. I think teachers were worried about, how do I do 2 things at the same time? So we tried to develop models that tried really to provide good quality instruction for both groups. So anyway, and I've been trying to read as much about what other districts are doing as possible, and looking at feedback that other districts got too, just in terms of, what's working and what's not. There are probably some districts out there that are trying to film classes for the kids at home. I think our feeling is to provide direct live lessons for remote students was the best option. So moving forward, that is part of our thinking. And as Dr. Hooley said, we're going to be reviewing this really on a monthly basis. I say monthly, but it feels like we'll be really reviewing it on a daily basis. And if we need to make adjustments, we will as the year goes on. So hybrid for elementary. We are proposing a delayed start for those students for an hour. And that is so the teacher has time to do a lesson and kick the day off for the hybrid students who are home on those 2 days. And that would just be at the beginning of the day. Monday, Tuesday, or Thursday and Friday are a full day or minus that hour of in-person instruction. That's including some of our special classes. Wednesday is the remote for everyone day. And so that would be when the class is together at the elementary level, getting a half day of remote virtual instruction.
Protect your investment or your American.
And then the other half of that day, and this is for all of our teachers, is extra planning time and time for professional development. And that professional development, I think there's a lot of research that talks about professional development needs to be job embedded, and it needs to be structured throughout a school year. And so we have an opportunity to do that. And that PD will be an extension of the things that we're kicking off the year on. Appropriate uses of technology, teaching in a culturally responsive manner to our diverse student population, supporting kids socially and emotionally. And so that will be ongoing throughout the year. So on the sort of the home days for the hybrid kids, not, the Wednesday, they'll have a half day of instruction as a group. When they're home, they'll have that beginning 45 minutes to an hour of online instruction in the morning. They will actually have some specials that will be done virtually on those days. And we're kind of looking at the schedule, and we haven't been able to firm this up yet, to see if an afternoon check-in from the teacher from the classroom is possible. So that's something that we're working on. Next slide. So the elementary remote, again, this is a little bit of a work in progress. We're really trying to firm this up. And again, just to say it again, I think this really came loud and clear from the elementary teachers. They were really concerned with trying to teach students in their class and be filmed, and teaching kids remote felt like a real challenge. And I think that was a really legitimate concern. So I think one of the number one questions from parents choosing this is, will my child have a teacher or have a specific teacher? So yes, those students will. Their schedule, we developed a schedule again with that equity model in mind that will mirror the hybrid schedule. And so they'll also have 2 days of just full instruction like a hybrid student does, except theirs will be done remotely. So that will be from a teacher, from an elementary teacher that they're assigned to the whole year. And they will receive instruction from that teacher on a remote day for the entire day. Now, that does not mean an elementary student is just in front of a Google Meet for 6.5 hours. I think what we really saw last year, lots of good best practices from our elementary teachers. So it'll be a combination of whole group instruction. I think small group instruction, especially for elementary students, is really key and vital. Independent work, also some group work. And so we want those days to be really vibrant and full for those students, just like a day in school would be. Wednesday would be the same for the, all virtual students or the hybrid students. It's a half day of online instruction from their teacher. And then the days, the 2 other days they'll be receiving that sort of beginning of the day, 45 minutes of online instruction or 45 minutes to an hour. And they'll have specials on that day, and then check-ins from teachers at different times as well. So again, we wanted to create a model where we felt that the hybrid students and the all virtual students were all receiving the same level of instruction and all assigned to one consistent teacher. That was important to us. We're trying to connect kids or elementary students to their home schools as much as possible. We will have to move probably a few kids, but we're trying to keep that to a minimum. And I know for some folks that doesn't matter, and I know for other folks that matters a lot. But we are trying to also have a model where students are still connected to their home school. Mike, you can do the next slide. Middle and high school. So the big questions for this, and I'll get into just a little bit of what their schedule looks like. The big question for middle and high school has been just what in the world, how are we dealing with the students choosing all remote virtual? And so middle and high school are doing it differently. One of the reasons they're doing it differently is the middle school schedule is a lot simpler than a high school schedule. We offer a lot of different classes at the high school, and electives and just sort of one-off classes that really increases a level of complexity for creating this. And so the way the middle and the high school are approaching this is different, and I'll get into detail on that in a second with some slides coming up. Another thing that was really important to us for middle and high school, kind of back to what we're doing in elementary as well, is kids are receiving instruction every single day, and kids are on a schedule. No, I just got a little warning, so hopefully my internet stays stable. Kids have a schedule every day. That was a huge piece of it. Kids have live teaching, which was a huge piece of feedback, and that will happen this year. And so we'll be taking attendance for students who have things going on in their home or family that they're not able to live attend a class. The classes will be recorded so they can attend them later. But we really wanted to add a lot more structure and a lot more live teaching to what we do. At the high school, what we really wanted to do as well is make sure that we could offer the same courses, for the all remote students that the hybrid students are receiving. We noticed that some other districts, and I don't know if this is regional, I was kind of looking across the whole state. Some districts drastically reduced the classes at the high school level that remote students could take, and we didn't want to do that. We wanted there to be equity between students choosing both models. So at the middle school, if you can hit the next slide. At the middle school, they created a model, and they shared this in their town hall that they did last week. They created a schedule where kids who are choosing strictly remote virtual learning follow a schedule for 8 periods a day on Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. For the students choosing the in-person hybrid, they on their home days they'll be attending 4 remote classes, their content classes, during those days. And on the Wednesdays for both the middle and the high school, I'm excited about this. There will be a social emotional focus. There will be talking circles, time for students. There'll be time throughout the week as well, but specific time for students to be checking in with social workers, guidance counselors, psychologists. And also there will be intervention and enrichment periods on those Wednesdays. That won't be voluntary, you'll be taking attendance for students who need extra help. And we really want to make use of that time that students are both getting supported on the social emotional side, but also getting extra learning support. I'm also interested in finding ways to provide some enrichment opportunities on those days for students who need that as well. Secondary teachers at the middle and high school are receiving they are receiving time on those days for extra planning, and they are also receiving time on those days for professional development too. You can click to the high school or to the next slide. So this is the high school is still kind of working on it, but this is what they're working through right now. And so in a sense, the kids, and this is a change from what we were thinking a while back, but we were really struggling, and I want to give a shout out to the high school folks because I think they came up with about 7 different schedules in an attempt to try to figure out how to pull this off. And so what they came up with was for the in-person hybrid students, they're coming in for a little more than a half of a day, and for the in-person part, so it's about 3.5 hours. They're having lunch, and lunch is sort of like a grab and go kind of thing. There's like a kind of a time off during that time, so then they can hop on at home for some of the remote classes. The remote classes are going to be offered in the afternoon, as you can see, just looking at that slide. And so this is a way that the teachers are teaching both the in-person and the remote kids and keeping the learning moving every single day during the week. So if you're noticing with every single thing I've been talking about at elementary, middle, and high school, there's a little bit of give and take with all of this. Like I said, elementary proves to be pretty complex and more complex than we thought. High school proves to be pretty complex as well. But we were creating models where the remote students are on a schedule, and when and also the hybrid students who are home for their home days are on a schedule as well. And so we're excited to be able to pull this off. Again, many of the high school teachers, although many were willing, many of the high school teachers were really concerned about trying to film their classes for kids at home. A lot of their classes are like discussion-based or conversation-based, and trying to film that in a way that felt authentic for the students at home, I think was a real struggle for many of the high school teachers, although I know many were willing to give it a shot. So this is what we're moving forward with right now. The Wednesdays are similar, like I said, with the middle school, a chance to do a lot of social emotional check-ins, and also have some very specific schedule times for students to receive extra help and for it not to be optional. So again, we really try to provide equity between students choosing the at-home model and students choosing the hybrid model. And with those students who are choosing the home model, we wanted a schedule, we wanted live teaching. And so we feel, and we also wanted to support our teachers with time on Wednesday, and also support them that they could have some dedicated time to work with the students at home. So we are moving forward with this, and we'll probably be making some tweaks to this as we go. But we're excited to be at a place where we feel like we can move forward and really try to meet the needs of all of our students to the best of our ability. Next slide, please. So just some other updates. So, you know, I'm just going to grab a drink here. Excuse me. We have ordered the event tents. They'll be, we had to go through quite a process for those. We had to have our architect help us, and we had to go through an approval process at the state level because it was an official instructional space. But the timeline has them being installed right before our students come back. And again, those are, you know, I want each school to develop a schedule for their use. I see it as a time for teachers to do some learning outside, and I think they could be used in a variety of ways. And I've already been hearing some cool ideas of how they could be used. So this is a great example of something that really needed to be planned about 6 to 8 weeks ago, which is when we started to plan that part. Just from the approval process alone took quite a while. And we still, despite starting what I thought was a while ago, we're still getting them in place right before the students come. For our unit ventilators, the MERV 13 filters have arrived and are being installed. Our PPE, our masks, our first installment of those are the disposable ones we actually ordered, and they came quite a while ago. And we have our disposable ones coming in the next few days. And this actually was brought up in the public comment. And this is something when I do all the different town halls, either with or conversations with employees or families, this is something that comes up a lot, the symptom check. And so we discussed as an administrative team today. I was kind of working on it or thinking about it all weekend. And we're going to make a slight tweak to what we're doing with that, and we'll share this with the whole community. But we are still going to go forward with the app, where we're going to ask employees and families to do a symptom check and a temperature check at home. But we are going to equip and staff our buildings so that the temperature check can also happen when people come in. especially focusing on our students. So we're working on the staffing part of that. There'll be different staff that help us with that, but we felt it was just one more measure to help people feel good about being in person. So that is a change to plan. And I will say, and this was with a lot of things, that the guidelines were exhaustive in many ways and well put together in many ways, but there was a few areas that were left up to local discretion. So this is one that we're going to up a little bit, and we're going to do symptom checking. Now, you know, with our hybrid model and as many students choosing the all remote virtual as are choosing, so we're really only going to have probably a third of our students in a building at a time. And our high school being, you know, the largest number of students coming in, we'll probably have close to 300 students, somewhere between 250 and 300 coming in at any given day. So we're going to have multiple entry points, which is a change from how we've operated in the past, but we'll follow all of our same safety procedures with that. We'll have multiple entry points to our building, so kids aren't standing in a line for half an hour trying to get their temperature read. So that is a change and an update that we are adding to the plan. Next slide, please. So then just next steps, we will be putting out a district communication at the end of this week about what schedules will look like at all levels. Lots of people are anxious at all levels about what exactly is my schedule going to be at the elementary level, who is my teacher or my child's teacher. And I know this is on people's minds because as I was out and about a little bit this weekend, people were asking me at the grocery store. So I know it's on everyone's mind. So so we are working on that. Normally we would have had it out probably this week, I think. And this is a different week, or this is a different year. There's a lot of things we're working out, but our hope is that we can get that stuff out by the end of next week. We're going to do a few more town halls. We might do some kind of more targeted at specific levels again. I think the high school might be doing another town hall just to talk about their schedule. We're updating a lot of important parts of our reopening website starting tomorrow, and then we'll be adding more of those updates at the end of the week. So tomorrow we're going to update the reopening website with recordings of some of the various town halls that we've done. We kind of lined them all up today, and we'll load them up tomorrow. And also with a couple of the changes we're making to our planning as well. Just another thing that is in the works, because I've tried in all of my communication with the community, whether it's this sort of thing or written, I've kind of tried to show that this is a continual work in progress. The county government and County Department of Health have reached out to us to talk about a more substantial testing program, a COVID-19 testing program. So we just got that information right at the end of last week, and we are talking with them tomorrow just about what it will look like. It would be partnering with a testing agency in Dutchess County, and the goal of it would be to provide rapid results tests for either students or staff or both when needed. So instead of, my understanding, and we'll be able to talk more about this at the end of this week, but my understanding of this is that we would then be able to ask people to go to a specific place to do one of these rapid tests instead of just saying, go get a test somewhere, and check out the county website to find out where. We can be specific. But there's a lot of details to work out about that, but we're excited that the county is moving in that direction. I think they're following the work of some of our other counties, and I was very pleased to see that. So we'll be able to update more about that. And then another thing we'll provide a little more detail in our updates about is just some really specific guidelines about masks, so people can start prepping their children for it, and also how mask breaks will work at our different levels. So we have a lot more work to do. Like I said all along, this is just kind of like the everything thing right now, and we'll also have if we need to go full remote at any time, we'll have what that schedule looks like so people can see if and when we have to flip into like a full remote model. I'm trying to, the state used the word remote for all their planning this summer. You can tell I'm trying to kind of move away from that term because I don't like it. And so I need to start kind of banishing it from my vocabulary just because the state uses it this summer. I think remote makes it feel like people moved to Alaska or something and everyone is still in our community. And so I want to kind of start changing how we phrase that. So the work is ongoing and getting a lot of good and helpful feedback from community members and staff, and we'll keep doing that and working to be ready. I say this at all the town halls, you know, I ask people to be prepared for changes. It's really cool to see that the New York transmission rates keep getting lower. If I read things correctly today, they got even lower than they have been, and they've been under 1%, I think, for 16 days. But we will keep monitoring that. And, you know, and I say this not to be, to scare people, but just like last spring, we never know when something might change and that we might need to do something different. And so our task is to try to prepare for all of it. So that's my update tonight. The one thing that we don't need to like discuss this in public, but I just want to throw out there for the board. I think it might be useful for me and the district to have another board meeting next week, like maybe in the middle of the week, just to give an update about just sort of like here's everything, and just in case there's more questions or we need to update folks. So again, we don't need to talk about date availability right now, but I think it'd be probably useful not to wait till September 14th for another board meeting. So I just want to put that out there to the board. All right, any questions?
I have a couple questions.
Yeah.
For the elementary, it's not really a question, but when you said that the specials would be remote or, you know, virtual, will the teachers have a schedule of when the kids need to sign on for their specials?
Yeah. I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm probably misspoke just a little bit. The specials are going to be a mix of in-person and virtual. So we're working with our different special areas to see which ones work more. We're looking at musical band, elementary band being virtual, and some other things. But yeah, we're looking to do it in a schedule. Like any sort of all remote day is not going to be 6 hours in front of a screen or 6.5 hours in front of a screen, but we do want more of a schedule, and we want students to be more connected to the different classes than they were in the past. I'm not exactly sure how that will look for things like PE, and that may still be more kind of independent. But yeah, we're trying to do the remote specials on more of a schedule.
And so for the middle school and high school, is the middle school on the 3.5 hours? So basically, if you're in the hybrid model and you're going in person, you're only going to go to periods 1 through 4, one time a week?
That's just for the high school? And no, well, in person, yes. But then the thinking is that they're hopping on the remote classes the other 2 or 3 times.
Right. So that kid that goes in the hybrid that's going 2 days a week is only going to have period 1 math class one time in person a week.
And the other's remote, yeah.
And then the other 4 days or 3 days or 4 days are remote?
Yeah.
And why are they going to 3.5 hours to high school? Like, why are they coming in a half a day if they're in? Why not staying?
So we can schedule some pure remote classes. We looked at what some other high schools were kind of struggling with the same thing. I think my biggest worry is asking 100 high school teachers to try to connect with the remote kids in different ways. Some would be able to maybe film their classes live. I'm hearing just sort of vicariously that some of the high school teachers might still try to do that. Some of the high school classes don't really work that way at all, and sort of leaving it up to I don't want to say chance, but leaving it up to the variabilities that happen with all those different classes worried me. So we wanted to go that way.
And for the middle school, for the goal group, when they start on the 14th, how are they going to know what to sign in for, what time to sign in for the math, science, English, and social studies? Like it's the blue group's first day in person.
Right.
On the 13th and then the 15th.
That's going to be communication from the Roundabout folks. I mean, that's part of the challenge of all this, but communication is key to all this. So hopefully we can get as many kids on as we can. That first day.
Anthony, did you have a question?
Yes. So no, just not a question, just a comment to the administrative team that, I bump into parents and they really appreciate how difficult this thing is. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Kristen, you're muted. You're muted, Kristen. There, you're unmuted now. Oh, but we still can't hear you. James, you want to go ahead?
Sure. Hopefully Kristen gets that fixed. Yeah, I had just a question, concern, and actually you may have already addressed it, but you didn't mention it before. I do want to start, Matt, by thanking you, as always, for this Herculean effort that you guys are doing. In a way, it's a bit of the impossible, and I think you guys are pulling it off really, really great. I'm especially happy to hear about the focus on socio-emotional learning and that component. That piece is, I think, going to be really huge and easily could be overlooked. So I'm really happy to hear that you guys are focusing on that. So I had a few instances, and I think probably we're all experiencing it a little bit when I go out in the world. I go to the grocery store. I feel like parents more than usual are kind of grabbing me to bend my ear. And I heard the same concern coming from, it was actually 4 different parents in a matter of a few days. And this was about a week ago. And they were all parents who have children who have special needs, special learning needs and IEPs. And to a varying degree, I think that I sensed that there was a bit more anxiety than I'm sensing from a lot of the parents of the regular population. There were concerns, I heard mentions about communication. I know you had a town hall or a forum since then, so hopefully that solved some of it. In general, I think a lot of us follow the protocol that when a parent comes to us, I tell them to reach out to you or PPS, which is what I did. So I don't know, I know one of them did. But when I hear the same thing from a few, it made me just want to check in and say that, to hear you kind of speak to parents who may not have actually had access to either the forum or to one of us board members, just to see kind of what accommodations we're doing to make sure that the parents with special needs are being served.
Yeah, no, I for sure have gotten some of those concerns. I would ask folks to reach out to me or Don Condello specifically, and we can try to help. I think, I don't want to sound at all like I'm making excuses. I think part of it is just some of this instructional stuff really kind of started to come together in the last few days. And then, the other complexity we're dealing with is we're implementing 2, they're not different models, but 2 somewhat separate models in a sense. And so I will say this, like I'm not speaking for all students with special needs, but I do know some students with special needs, if they're able to come to school, benefit from the in-school instruction, and so we're happy to be starting and providing that. But trying to do that and also offer like the full sort of virtual model has been a challenge. It's a challenge I think we're meeting, but it's been a challenge for sure. So anyway, in short, we're going to do more communication on that front. We need to start reaching out to individual families. If they can also check in with their school principal as well if they have questions at that level. But reach out. We'll keep trying to communicate. But I understand the frustration and anxiety for sure, and I'm sorry about that.
Kristen, you want to try again? Anne Marie, she's Sophia now. I don't know if you can see her.
Can you hear me? No. So I saw that the governor released today these guidelines around sports, which I think seem to arrive. It seems like something new arrives, or some new wrinkle is thrown out there just as we kind of get things nailed down. So I'm sure everyone's really excited about sports, but at the secondary level with a 3-hour schedule, and I don't expect you to have this figured out. But there were questions about what this would look like and how it could happen with transportation and hybrid and all of these other logistical challenges. So I just wanted to find out if John Giametta has already been thinking about this, and if if we're going to have a workshop in the future related to sports.
Yeah, we can do a workshop about sports. I know John has really been focusing on it. And I understand the concerns about the shorter day at the high school. I think I was equally worried or more worried about serving the remote kids in a meaningful way. And we kind of had to make a trade-off with that. That being said, I know Lisa Soto mentioned to me that they're also trying to work on a plan. Obviously, it has to be a limited number of students, but students can reserve a spot in either the library or I think the cafeteria to work and study in the afternoon. Like if they want to stay either with the Wi-Fi in the building, or if they need to stay, for like a sport or an activity, that they have that option. So I'm not sure the numbers that we can do, because we have to account for social distancing when we do that, but I know they're trying to work that into their plan too. But no, I think a workshop on sports would be really good. I think that might be another good reason to try to have a meeting next week. But yeah, I know John has been excited about this possibility, has been really preparing for it. And so we definitely aim as a district to participate. So I want to be clear with that. We want our students to be able to participate, following all the guidelines that we have. And I've been so focused on just getting school started. I don't have the sports guidelines down pat. So I need to really dive deep into those myself, so I'm more comfortable with them too. So yeah.
And I just wanted to follow up about one thing I cut out, so I don't know if you addressed this, but in terms of the social emotional component, which I think is probably one of the most important aspects of returning to school, because I've been reading that, students, especially secondary level students, there's an increase in numbers of kids who say they will commit self-harm. Kids who are isolated are more vulnerable to being recruited by extremist groups. It also is more likely to breed susceptibility to addiction. So I think that, as far as how we're handling that, I don't know if we're moving forward with circles or what the plan is or what it looks like for that, creating that connection for both our in-person and distance learning students. But I think that would be, I think in terms of these times and what we're operating within, that's kind of one of the bigger priorities. I know that we're always here for student achievement and and for academic advancement. I just think realistically, I think if people are putting their kids in person, they want them to have that sense of connection. So, and I think anybody who's making the choice to not have their student in the building still wants that.
For sure.
And that's part of like being part of this, being part of a community and feeling connected to something. So I just,
Right.
I know everyone's worried about the particulars of education, but I think this is something important to know about.
Yeah, I think one of the reasons why we tried to drive the planning with trying to make the remote and hybrid is, at least in our view, as equitable as possible. We wanted that sort of equity of access between the groups just as a starting point. But no, I mean, we just talked about today as an administrative group, like how do we make sure, what things do we need to put in place for our all, virtual students, that they feel really connected. And it's one of the reasons why we're trying to connect as many of the elementary students to their home school. On Wednesdays, especially, they'll have a chance at the elementary level to connect with kids who are in person. At the secondary level, I think they're going to be, or I guess I should say at the high school, they're going to be kind of, in a sense, attending some of the same classes, no matter what model they chose. So that will be taking place. So those connections will be happening. But no, I will message this as much as I possibly can. Like, we really need to be focused to a person on bringing people back to a sense of community, not stressing out about the standards from day one, or trying to meet state testing, whatever. It's just like a whole new world right now. And I think every single one of our students is anxious about something. And, so I see it as a dad. And I know we all sort of hope and pray that the teachers and administrators are ready for all of this. And so I can hope and pray on the dad side. And on the superintendent side, I can try to do everything I possibly can to help people feel prepared to really start students kind of from where they are, to really try to work on building community, not just going crazy with the academics from the first day. And maybe for some kids this will be very easy, but I know for a lot of kids, no matter what model is chosen, it'll be hard. So it's something that we're thinking about a lot. We had a really good conversation about it again today as an administrative team. We essentially meet for several hours a day now. We've been doing that for the last few weeks, and we're just trying to go over every last aspect of all of this. So yeah, it's a big concern of mine, but I also feel like it's something that we can do well. And in terms of the talking circles, we have, and Eric, you may be able to be more specific, but we have some starting this week. And so our goal is to get them really kicked off over the next 2 weeks and just keep them going all year. So these were the talking circles I talked about earlier in the summer about trying to get going for this upcoming school year. So they're starting this week, and we want to keep them going all year. And also we have a number of staff members trained in the talking circle, restorative practices model, and we want them doing it. And then lastly, our elementary teachers, we had another large cohort of teachers trained in the responsive classroom model. That was something that survived our cuts. Sadly, we had to cut PD a bit this year with all the financial constraints we have, but that was something that made the cut. And what was cool about the training this year is the facilitator really focused on ways to build community both in person and online. And I know who the presenter was, and I know she was doing it as a teacher last year. So I think it was a really good experience for our teachers too at the elementary level.
Just to piggyback off of what Dr. Landau said in terms of the talking circles that's taking place at the secondary level, it's taken a bit more time because we've included students as facilitators. And so we're really trying to work with the student leaders in order to get a good gauge of what the circle topics need to be and the type of questions that we need to ask to really get the discussions going. So these meetings have been taking place almost weekly with the student leaders and then also with the teacher leaders. And so we're wrapping up this week with those sessions. And then we'll be, at the beginning of the year, we'll be able to start with having, groups of students going through the talking circles. Some of the circles will be led by our students with the support of teachers. And then we will also have some circles that will be led by Dutchess Mediation.
Are there other questions? Laura, Alyssa, Craig?
I think all of the questions I might have had were already asked by my fellow board members, so thank you.
I had one question. It was, I was thinking along the lines of what Kristen was talking about. And Matt, you might have already mentioned this in some form, but just to reiterate, especially in the beginning, are we gonna make sure that we're reaching out to every student, both in person and remote, rather than waiting maybe for a proactive sign that there's something wrong? Is there gonna be sort of like a programmatic way to make sure every student in every class has been contacted or connected with, especially at the beginning, just to see how they're doing or what they're coming into the classroom with?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, I can't exactly spell out every detail of how it's going to happen, but I mean, it's not that we needed a state requirement to do it this go around, but it's also a state requirement. Anthony pointed out about that first day. We want to make sure students know the expectations. They have if they need internet access, that they have a hotspot. We want to, if they need something switched with their Chromebook or something fixed that's done before the first day of school, we want to make sure our kids are ready and checked in with, not only on a materials level, but just checked in with that that they have what they need, or we find out what other supports they need.
Are we
I think part of what also will help us really kind of track students is just having all of our kids on more of a regular schedule. And that was something that wasn't in place last spring to some degree and will be in place this year. And so just kind of having a normal routine will kind of let us know right away, if something's going on with the student. I mean, one of the things, so the state's requiring attendance this year, but one of the things we're talking about at the administrative level, and we'll talk about at the teaching level, is we do have, some of our older students this is still all of this planning, and we're still just getting kids in 2 days a week. And so there's childcare issues, and, some of our students are going to be babysitting or taking care of their younger siblings, or they just might not be able to, because of things going on in their lives, they might not be able to attend, each remote section. So we also want to make sure a student can attend a class by checking in later and watching the recorded version of the class, and, connecting with the teacher that way too. We know we need more of a routine, more accountability, so to speak, for everybody, but also that kindness and compassion that we talked a lot about last spring. We still need to have that because we're still in a really difficult place as a community and country, and we need to make sure, that we are checking in. So yeah, sorry, I'm kind of giving a long-winded answer, but I think what also might be helpful in future meetings is we bring our building leaders in. Normally we kind of spread that over the whole fall. I think with this year being so unique, we try to maybe pack them into the first couple of board meetings or the next couple of board meetings, because they can get more specific about it too, about their planning for that. But it's very important.
And can I just ask one more quick question?
Sure.
If a student needs to access, help, like support, emotional support, and they're full remote, can we provide that remotely? Is that something we're able and allowed to do?
Oh yeah, for sure.
Okay.
I mean, we, we want the remote virtual students to be able to access and experience as much as any other student. Obviously, something like a sport, I mean, an all remote student can, by state policy, they can be on a sport, but they might be choosing not to, for the same reasons they're choosing to be remote for during the school day. But yeah, for sure, like they will have as much access to support as any other student. Like it's very, I don't know if this is clear, but it was very, very important to me to create models that felt, it's my perception that they feel equitable. I guess the proof will be kind of in the implementation, but it is very important to me to try to work with all of our staff in creating models that felt like there wasn't, one was like the haves and one was the have-nots. That was the last thing I wanted to do. So in my last town hall, I said it, so what it did was create kind of two imperfect models. And that's okay, as long as the learning is moving ahead each day and we're supporting all of our students. But yeah, it's very, very important to me that everybody feels and believes that they are an equal member of the school district with what we're trying to do. I was looking at, I get random, I sort of joke in my town halls that I made the mistake of like looking up one article about some other school reopening. And so if I ever click on Facebook, all I get in my suggested whatever newsfeed is all I get are school articles. But I've read some of them, and some of the things I've seen from other districts, just kind of all over New York and the country, is people being really concerned about like making the all remote choice and missing out on a lot of things, like either having desks cut, supports cut, things like that. So we've really put a lot of effort into putting together a model that feels like access is equitable for all students. So we just need to make it happen September 14th.
I have a question.
Okay.
Yeah, on the hotspots and technical support, that's going to play quite an important role. So who are you going to call? If somebody needs some kind of technical support, or they want to inquire about getting some hotspot for Wi-Fi, do they call the school? Do they call the technology department? Is there like a speedy button you can push for getting help fast?
Yeah, I know when people email the help, I forget what the email address is. I should know. It's support, tech support. Someone help me with the email. I know our tech staff is great at getting back to people right away. Craig, one of the questions on the survey, or you may have noticed it, is if people need help with the internet. And like I said, we're not 100%, but we're getting close. And so we already know the families that needed support with the internet last spring, and so we're adding families to that list who need it now. And we're trying to provide for all of them. One of the things we saw last year is families with multiple children needed, sometimes depending on their location, needed multiple hotspots. So we tried to provide those for folks. I wish it was more than hotspots, but that sort of seems like something beyond my purview a little bit. But yeah, so we have collected a sort of a new group of families that need assistance with that, and the email address is help@beaconk12.org. So a lot of people use that. I don't know the exact number of tickets, work tickets that they've generated, but we have an awesome tech team, and they're good at resolving issues.
Go ahead, Kristen.
So I just want to know how that's being publicized, because I'm imagining that there's a lot of people whose circumstances have changed since the $600 unemployment supplement has ended, and that people might find themselves in a different economic reality. And I know you were speaking to that and you're collecting those names, but just that help at Beacon K-12, I mean, has that, I'm sorry to say, there's been so much communication that I don't know what I've read or not read anymore, but is that something that's being widely communicated so that anyone who knows that they might have a change in status can alert you rather than waiting to find out?
Right. Well, people have just been filling it out on the survey in the last 2 weeks, and we almost have 90% of those in. So that was probably the most recent way we tried to collect it. When we call families, of the families that are kind of left that we haven't heard from, when we call them to ask kind of what model they want, or if they have questions, we'll also ask that. So I think that honestly could get us to like at least knowing right now what all the needs are, and then we'll try to make clear if circumstances change how people can reach out to us.
I just had a follow up to the high school with the 3.5 hours. Has it been considered to lengthen the periods of the periods 1 through 4 and make it, instead of 3.5 hours, like 4.5 or 5 hours? Because if a period is only 50 minutes long and they're only going to that class 1 time a week, and they're going to be socializing and stuff as well, I don't know how much they're going to get out of that just 1 period a week of in-person instruction. Whereas if you lengthened it, instead of it being 3.5 hours, to make it not like a block, because you don't want a full block, but making it 15 minutes longer, to have it be 5 hours a day, that would still give the teachers 2.5 hours to do the remote piece, but yet it would lengthen the periods for the in-person instruction for the kids.
Yeah. Thought has been given to that, and they may not have ruled that out. So I'm not sure, but I know that was part of the talking about it. So it may still be, I just don't know specifically. Like, I know they thought about it. I don't know if they completely ruled it out. They're still kind of talking it through with the teachers. I know they tried to meet with almost every department today about it. So I can give you more of an update.
I don't think it was mentioned at the town hall meeting that Ms. Soto did with the parents. I know that discussed about, but I didn't hear the 3.5 hours a day.
We just kind of in the last few days came up with it.
So it was after the meetings that she had with the parents?
Yeah, I mean, she's planning on having another one.
Does anybody else have any questions for Matt? I just had a quick question about the circles. I'm just wondering how you're are you just letting students know, or is this something that's going to go out to parents of secondary kids?
Yes, it's going to go out to the families.
Great.
And it's going to be open, open for selection.
Okay,
For kids to sign up, I should say.
Okay.
I actually do have one more question. So especially for high schoolers, has anything been communicated to them directly about what their day is going to look like, or what a typical week is going to look like once we return?
No, this has just been worked on the last couple of days, so no.
Will there be some direct communication to students before the first day so that they know what to expect?
Yeah, for sure.
And how will that be conducted? Will that be like a Zoom, or will it be an email? I mean, my senior, my rising senior asked me yesterday, what's going on with school? And I realized that we've all been talking about this stuff for weeks and weeks, but some of these kids don't know anything about it yet.
Right. I think they'll find different ways to communicate it. I don't know if they would do like a big, huge Zoom. I think they'll have different ways of getting the information out.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Matt. We have one more workshop, and it's Anne Marie talking about the tax warrant.
Thank you. Mike is going to put some slides up. I have just a couple to explain. Thank you, Mike. So on the agenda tonight is we're asking the board to vote on the apportionment schedule for the tax warrant. You can go to the next slide, Mike. So I want to remind the board and the public that our levy increase for the budget was 3.23%, and that was at the cap for the 2021 school year. Next slide, please. These are items that impacted the tax cap calculation. We had mentioned this during the budget presentations that we had done, but I thought it would be important to just mention it again. So our tax base growth factor has been significant in the last few years for Beacon, and it allowed us to increase the tax cap by a little over $600,000, slightly less than last year. And that basically takes into account the measure of change in property value due to physical and quantity changes, so additions that come on the tax rolls each year. The allowable growth factor, or people look at it as the 2% calculation. That's where you have the maximum, the lesser of 2%, or the inflation factor. So this year the inflation factor was 1.8%. So we increased in the tax cap calculation only 1.8%, not 2%. So those things kind of impacted the amount that we could levy for the year. Next slide, please. So again, this is just a reminder that we used $2.5 million of excess fund balance and reserves to keep the levy at the tax cap. And we are using the remainder of the tax reduction reserve. Now, I had mentioned last year we were going to do that. 2019-20 obviously was a very unique year, and we did have some cost savings in some of the areas since we didn't physically have to go to school for 3.5 months. So we decided to defer using the tax reduction reserve remainder, which is $200,000 for the 2020-2021 school year, to kind of help us balance the budget. Next slide, please. So these are the changes in assessment, and normally I only talk about the homestead percent increases because that is what impacts our taxpayers. But what I thought was important this time was to mention the non-homestead. So the non-homestead increased by 9.4%. So that is our tax business. When speaking to the assessor in the city of Beacon, I wanted to know how many new properties were coming on the tax rolls this year. And what she said was interesting. It wasn't new properties necessarily, it was additions to properties that were already on the roll. So I found that to be interesting because there are a lot of apartments and condos and lofts that had started to come on the rolls, but as you can see, you know, just going around Beacon, that they're either complete or almost complete. So they're being rented and sold. So that would definitely be part of the increase in the non-homestead. Last year, there was a big increase in the assessments for homestead or taxpayers. And when we did this presentation last year, we talked about the tax rate going down and everyone was really excited. Then they got their tax bills and their taxes went up and nobody could understand why. So part of the assessments last year increasing weren't necessarily new properties that came on the roll. It was changes in people's assessment. So that's where they saw it. So I thought it would be interesting to say it's only 1.3%. So I don't believe that it would be as significant an increase for taxpayers as it was last year during this time. Next slide, please. So these are the tax rates per thousand for Beacon, Fishkill, and Wappingers for the homestead. And you'll notice that the tax rate did increase a slight bit. The tax rate per thousand is less than what we talked about during the budget process. So you are seeing some changes in the assessments, but this is a year that it did increase. So I just want to mention that as well. Next slide. And again, you see increases in the tax rates of non-homestead as well. Not a significant amount, but something that I thought is worth mentioning going forward. Next slide, please. So I wanted to give you some kind of perspective. So even though the tax rate has increased a little bit this year, I've compared it to 2015-16, where our tax rates were well over $16. So a lot of things happening in Beacon, building that's going on, the tax-based growth factor, we're able to kind of keep the tax rate at the smaller amount we can. So it just gave you a little bit of perspective of where we are and where we were. Next slide, please. So in the city of Beacon, I try to use an average home value with STAR. STAR exemption continually decreases each year. That's set in April, or this year was a little bit later by New York State Taxation and Finance. So with the budget and the tax increase, we're talking about on an average home of $290,500 with the regular STAR. Tax increase for the year would be $48. It's a 1.24% increase from last year to this year. Next slide, please. In the town of Fishkill, with a house with the assessment of $353,500, and taking into consideration the decrease in STAR, an increase of $57 for the year, or a 1.18% increase from last year. Next slide, please. And then finally, Wappingers, $350,500 with regular STAR. The increase is about $48, or it's a 0.98, almost 1% increase. So you'll see across the three municipalities, the increases are a little bit more or less, but they're all running around 1% increase from last year. Next slide, please. And I had this slide last year in my, and back to school looked very different last year than it did this year. So I just wanted to leave it in there knowing we're going back to school. So I don't know if the board has any questions on any specific slide that we mentioned.
Go ahead, Kristen.
I have a couple of questions. One, with the 9.4% non-homestead increase, is that increased monies that are going to be coming into the district, or is that simply an increase in that type of property, but it's not resulting in tax money for the? And then I have a follow-up after that.
Okay, so the tax money remains the same. So we can't levy any more than what we put it out to vote. So the levy is exactly the amount of the levy we asked the voters to vote on. I think the 9.4% increase in the assessment means that that tax levy is spread differently across the three municipalities and across the homestead and non-homestead. And I think it also reflects on an additional taxable properties that came in under the business side of Beacon.
So I'm so sorry to I have a follow-up after this, but
That's okay.
On that.
Go ahead.
I just want to understand, I'm trying to think of this from just a layman's terms. So when all of those properties were being built, one of the things we were told is that they would result in increased money coming into the school district. The 9.4% increase, so we can't go out for more. So we have the levy this year, and that's just spread out differently than it has been in the past because there's more of these non-homestead. But does this mean in the future there's potential for more money to come to the school district via taxes, or is that not the case?
So the way the tax levy law is, and we have a tax cap, we really can't levy more than what the tax cap calculation is. I think the increase in the properties and the assessments in non-homestead keeps the level down, keeps the tax rate down for the rest of the municipalities, homestead and non-homestead. So basically you have the same amount of money being spread over more people, and that kind of helps keep the tax rate down for others, in mainly the taxpayers in Beacon, Wappingers, and Fishkill. So it's never more money because the way school district budgeting works, we have to only increase the budget by a certain amount and the levy by a certain amount. So it doesn't bring in more cash or more revenue. It kind of spreads it out differently. And what we've seen over the last couple of years with the tax rate, over the last 4 years, it had decreased and now it's a small increase. It's kind of kept the tax rate lower to try to help the people that currently live in the Beacon City School District community.
So my follow-up question is, you were talking about the growth factor, and I know tax-based growth factor is one of the evaluative criteria for state aid. So is it possible, we're looking at a pretty serious budget strain on New York State, that they are going to look at our school district and say, you've gotten wealthy enough that you qualify for less aid, but then we have to stay within this 2%. So is it possible that we'll be looking at our state aid decreasing because we're getting richer, but we still live within the tax cap?
So our state aid does have factors of it that are built on a wealth ratio. The good news for that is that it's a couple years behind. So it uses 3 to 4 years of data before when it calculates state aid. That's just kind of the formulas. So I understand your question. You're afraid, we're afraid that we have this tax-based growth factor and we're getting richer, quote unquote, but yet our state aid would be decreased. I mean, that is a worry going forward. It won't be an immediate worry. So it won't be this year they'll look at us and say, you got a tax-based growth factor so you can afford and we don't have to pay you the state aid. It would not happen in the same year or maybe even the next year, but it is a worry and we need to keep an eye on state aid going forward over the next couple of years.
Because we've had now several years of growth.
Right.
So I know we've been saying for years, this is not something that we have to worry about because there's a lag, but I feel like we're entering that lag period of where we've been growing now for a few years.
Right. And I honestly think just the financial condition of New York State, that state aid is going to look differently for everyone. Not necessarily just this year with what they're withholding from our state aid, but going forward, they may even change the formula going forward, just because the economy in New York State doesn't rebound quick enough. We're going to have an issue, just going forward over the next few years. So I understand your concern and your question. That would be something that we really need to keep an eye on and work on going forward.
Yeah, to that point, I think once we're past the reopening craziness and then whatever follows the reopening craziness, I feel like we should have some, I don't know which committee to bring it to, but I feel like we should plan to have this be something we are looking at and continually monitoring and thinking about in terms of Beacon and planning forward, because this is not something I think that we want to be caught off guard with. I mean, we are looking at people exiting the city and bidding wars over property, so the property values are increasing. And Beacon as a city or the surrounding areas now are getting wealthier. And so I think that's just something we're going to have to be balancing going forward.
And we can do that because I have a software package that does scenarios, so we can assume an increase in what the budget would look like and then, progressive decreases in state aid and what that would look like.
Hello.
Hi, Craig.
I think Kristen's point is a very good one for us to be looking at, and I think Anne-Marie's report is very useful, and I thank you for that. There's a couple of points I wanted to throw in to clarify that people sometimes don't understand the details, but a lot of that new growth that has happened in Beacon consists of large apartment complexes or condo projects or what have you. In the state law, a homestead property is a single-family home, a two-family, or a three-family. If it's four-family or bigger, it's considered commercial, and therefore it's in the non-homestead category. So the growth that she was referring to largely is in that area of non-homestead, consisting of large multifamily projects. And that seems to be a large part of what's also coming up on the planning board agendas. So that's a factor to keep in mind as you look at how these numbers play out. As to the state aid factor, if my numbers are in the ballpark. I think we are at about 40% state aid and 60% tax base. And I remember a number of years ago, not too many, when I was looking at these kind of ratios, we were pretty close to 50-50. So I think it has already shifted in the direction of greater reliance on the property taxes. So it's probably a good thing that we have some growth. And I've also noticed in the single family category that any place where a developer could park a single family home, including places where nobody thought you could do it, they've been doing it. So we've seen growth in that area as well. Thank you for the reports. And I agree, we probably should be looking at this on a regular basis. Maybe that could be a function assigned to the Finance Committee, which typically meets once a year just to look at the audits, but perhaps we could activate that to meet somewhat more often and track these things as they come in. Thank you.
Does anyone else have any questions for Anne-Marie? Okay. Thanks, Anne-Marie. Welcome. So next on our agenda is the public hearing on the revised code of conduct. James, do you want to talk about any changes there are in this code of conduct before we open to public comment?
Sure. Would you like for me to just list off the changes the major changes?
I think that'd be helpful.
Okay. So we had a pretty intense, well, not intense, but we had a pretty thorough overview. We are required to review and update the code of conduct every year. And when we make any changes, we have the public hearing. There were a number of changes that we discussed, specifically being in relationship to changes necessary for COVID. There's two that come to mind, and please, these are off the top of my head, so if anyone from the policy committee catches me forgetting something, let me know. One of which is, we mentioned in the code of conduct, a change regarding the students capturing, screen capturing, photograph, or recording any online courses. So any student who is participating in a remote course, they can do so with the teacher's express permission, but otherwise we added a line to the code of conduct that would not allow that, or that that prohibits that. Specifically, the reasoning that we discussed was about student and teacher privacy, and just the potential for it. We want to make sure that all of our students feel like they can express themselves in class safely and are not going to be recorded or reposted somewhere else. So that was one change. Another change is we adjusted the dress code to include a line that mirrors the reopening plan's language of requiring masks. So really what we wanted to do with that is really give clarity. The dress code oftentimes is something that gets referenced by students who are looking to know what is or is not acceptable modes of dress. There have been a lot of questions and concerns that we've been hearing from parents and teachers alike, just sort of about, while the reopening plan has a lot of clarity around the language requiring masks, we wanted to give an opportunity. So it's a very, very low level. I don't think the intention is that it would be policed, but it does offer teachers and students some guidance, and also gives an opportunity to begin a restorative process if that becomes an issue for some students who don't have any kind of documented other health issues or reasons why they might be doing that. Another change, and it shifts a little bit, we addressed some equity issues, particularly around race. I think that maybe to some of us, it's very clear that there are overlapping crises. The way that I understand this really is just the fact that our COVID has strained our systems, right? They've strained our structures. And anytime our structures are strained, it's oftentimes when certain inequities that just have historical inequities that have existed actually create the conditions to where some students who are represented by historically marginalized demographics might begin to suffer before other people so the inequity issues come up. So one of the things which we addressed is last year we established in our code of conduct the tiers of offenses, and we made a distinction in those tiers between profanity, use of profanity, which is a low-level tier disciplinary action, and then we have a level 3, which is higher, which would be targeted profanity and targeted hate speech, which is included in that. So that's a more severe than just using a curse word. So in that definition, last year we included the brackets to include symbols of hate speech, including swastikas. We expanded that language now to include nooses, and then we have another line that adds the display of, or the intentional display of, the Confederate flag, which would now also be classified as.
You're ready right now? Yeah. Okay.
Those are the 3 major changes. If anyone can catch me, I'm actually drawing a blank on the other changes on the code of conduct. Were there others that I'm not thinking of?
I think that captures the broad strokes.
It captures most.
And just to piggyback on what James was saying, and Eric, maybe you can jump in with more specifics, but last year, the major changes in the code that James talked about resulted in some different data. Eric, do you want to speak to that for a second? If you're there, maybe you're not.
Yes. When we disaggregated the data from 2018-19 school year, from September 2018 to March of 2019, and compared it to the data from September 2019 to March 2020, we saw some changes in the data that really reflected that what we were doing overall with the changes we made to the code of conduct, as well as just adding a restorative piece in there as well, how it was beginning to support our students. So a big change was in the total of out-of-school suspensions, let's say at the high school. There were over 300 less days of out-of-school suspensions, for when we disaggregated the data and compared it from up until March of 2020 compared to March 2019. So I think that decrease in the number of out-of-school suspension days for students is substantial, because that means that there was more time on task for students in terms of instruction. When we disaggregated it more to look at students by different demographics, we noticed that there were less students of color that were suspended during the 2019-20 school year as compared to the 2018-2019 school year as well. And similarly, at the middle school, we noticed that there were 18 less students overall suspended, out of school suspensions for the 2020 school year. 11 less economically disadvantaged students, and 7 less African-American students. So, to me, what we're saying is that where the board had charged us with putting in a code of conduct that really looked at the disproportionality that existed in our district in terms of suspension rates, we are making some growth in terms of decreasing the percentage of students in different demographics that are being suspended. So I'm hoping that, we can continue this trend, working with administration in both the buildings, or all the buildings has been really good over the past year. And I'm hoping, for, it to be similar again this year. Thank you.
Thanks, Eric. That's great. Bill, did you have anything else that you wanted to say about the changes made?
No, I just wanted to ask, did you talk about temperature checks?
Nope, I forgot it. That's absolutely right. But there's another change in there in regards to our search and seizure policy that it's just an adjustment to the language that gives the district permission to take students' temperature. Thank you, Bill.
So it's great to hear how the data has changed over this year. I think we made a lot of changes to the code of conduct last year, and it's great to be able to measure the change already in that. This is the only policy that requires a public hearing, I think, for sure. So at this time, I want to open it to the public. If there's anyone who is on this call that wants to speak on the code of conduct, please put your name in the chat or raise your hand or make yourself known.
Man, just I have a question, like a point of order. There is another issue that sometimes in policy committee, we cannot come to a consensus. And sometimes that means it goes back to workshop. And in this case, the committee actually proposed bringing that to the board at large to discuss. When would be the appropriate time for me to bring that issue up?
Well, just to give you my own version of what you're referring to, I don't think that the committee, there was consensus from the committee to bring that change to the board. I think it just didn't pass in committee, is how I understood it. The full committee was not there. Anthony was there, and I was there. So, but in any case, it wouldn't be during the public hearing, I think, and it doesn't totally make sense to me in terms of procedure to have a public hearing on a document and then propose to change the document later. And this is an odd policy given that it is, the only one that we have a public hearing on, but do you see how that?
Right. And that was so just to be clear, and Bill, you can correct me if I'm wrong. My understanding from legal, because we had our legal sitting on that, was that we could make changes as part of the public hearing.
I believe there was a discussion about having the opportunity to. I believe you can kind of select that section and discuss it. I'm not sure about making changes, but yeah. So that's what I know.
Okay.
Yes, Anthony.
So what I remember from legal was that because we didn't have a specific draft to look at that language, that we needed more time to do that, and the hearing was coming up. I think our legal suggested that if we had it by the time we had the hearing, that we could make that amendment there and not have to go back to a second hearing. That was my understanding from legal. I mean, and I think, I understood that to work either way, whatever change that may be, as long as it has as long as the public is able to weigh in on that change, even if it's at the hearing, I believe then that's sufficient. I mean, I will also say that if we do say, I guess James, you're proposing delete language, right? So if we do just make that change, and we finish the public hearing, and legal tells us, well, no, you really can't change it, then I guess we just change it back.
I suppose you could propose a motion. I will say that doing it that way feels very confusing to the public and to the board. I mean, this document has been posted publicly since the agenda went up, and process and procedure matter, and I think I've grown to respect it over the last 4 years that I've been on the board more than I did my entire life. So this feels like a dance around something that you want to happen, and I understand that. But I do, for me, it's not feeling like it fits within the procedure we have here, the established procedure.
Right. I mean, and I apologize for any miscommunication. It was my understanding from legal that that this was the correct process and procedure. And I also want to be clear that I have no intention or preposition that I, as one of 9 board members, can make something happen. But I do feel like that all board members should always have the opportunity to advocate for any position that they feel like needs to be advocated. So that was that was just my understanding of the process when we were in committee. I also would love to clarify, just so everybody knows, because it's above board, I've always operated under the procedures in policy committee that in the case of a tie, that the language would move forward to the entire board. And I want to make sure that we understand that the reasoning for that is that it facilitates conversation, because the board, the committee itself is never a decision-making body. So essentially, since we have a 4-member committee that is the policy committee, when we review policy and we make recommendations for possible language, what we're recommending is the draft that would come to the board for discussion and consideration. My reasoning for a tie moving forward is that since we represent such a small part of the board, effectively, if it was the other way around, it would effectively give any 2 board members veto power over any discussion that could possibly move forward. If you had 2 people in policy, they could oppose something, and that would be enough to keep it from moving forward to a discussion for the entire board. So ostensibly, I could imagine that 6 of the board members might also agree with the issue, but my main interest is always in having a transparent, open discussion and
right. That is also my interest. I mean, I'm really talking about the process here and not the subject at hand. And it doesn't feel like the most transparent process. I mean, we didn't have the full committee. We had 3 members. I think, as I remember it, Anthony, you voted against it for the reason that Matt was not there to weigh in on the language. It sounds like that's not even the language that we're considering now. And so this just feels like, I totally agree that the board should be able to weigh in on anything, but it feels like committee work that wasn't done in committee that now we're trying to move to the board. We are on deadline with this. It has to be approved before the end of the, or before the beginning of the school year. It's 9 o'clock. We have executive session. We have 3 unfinished business items to discuss on the consent agenda. So, and I say that, you know, with respect for board members' time. I feel like we have, it's great to be ambitious. I think it's important to, you know, to want a lot, but I'm also always sympathetic to a board member not being able to get everything done by, you know, that they want to do, because this is a volunteer position. One of the things that I most often hear from people who I ask to consider running for board is lack of time. So I think actually trying to keep those things to the committee work and then bringing up, you know, basically what is a finished product, whether I'm fine with your tiebreaker rule. I think that's totally fine. But this feels like bringing committee work to the board, as far as I remember the way it happened in committee.
If I can just ask for clarification, I do recall that the language was voted against, but it was the language. But I don't think that's the same thing that James proposed, and I think that sentence was I think the vote after that was 3-0. There's only 3 of us there to defer that sentence to legal, and I think that's what James is presenting. And I think that's where we got the interpretation that.
The email that I got at like 4:30 today was a brand new idea to me. I'll be honest, an elegant solution, but I feel like it's like bringing in this whole new thing that was not part of it. So I think right now, maybe, you know, I'm going to ask for someone, if you want to make a motion to amend the code of conduct, the dress code, please do. Otherwise, I think we should allow the public to speak on it if they want to and move on.
Well,
I think I'd like to make a motion to withdraw the straps due to the legal interpretation that we received and based on the committee discussion that we had on that sentence.
So I think first we have to decide whether or not we want to open that discussion. So
Oh.
do you want to
Make a motion, we open that discussion.
Second.
Okay, so we have the motion is to open a discussion to amend the code of conduct dress code. And it's been seconded by James. Are there comments or questions about it?
We're just talking about opening it for discussion. Nobody's really talked about the details of what it is we're going to talk about yet. Right.
That's correct. Yeah, it's whether or not we should open this discussion. Are there comments or questions about this?
I haven't seen the email that we're talking about. I had a conference call right up until this meeting, so I don't even know what we're talking about.
James, was that email sent to the entire board?
No.
Okay, so the rest of the board does not even know what we're talking about at this point.
Right.
Yeah, I don't feel 100% comfortable entering into a discussion about something that I have no information about and that I'm supposed to inform myself about right now.
Are there any other comments or questions about this?
And that would be.
I mean, it is also legal interpretation, I think.
So wait. So
I'm sorry.
I sent an email. We're going to let everybody talk once before we move forward. Is there any other comments or questions from someone who hasn't spoken yet?
I was absent from the policy committee last week, and as a member of the policy committee, I would prefer that we have a committee discussion on this topic before we have a public discussion on the topic.
Is there anyone else? Anthony, did you have something? Anthony saying?
Oh, because it was a legal interpretation, I am worried about having open discussion about the legal interpretation. I don't necessarily think it's that bad, but maybe perhaps that's executive session.
Okay.
I'm just confused. What's on the table is to have a discussion about something to adjust the code of conduct, correct?
To amend the dress code in the code of conduct, yes.
Okay, and it's on the table. The motion is to have a discussion about that.
No,
Right.
well, the discussion is whether or not to, yes.
Have the
to
discussion.
Yes.
Okay.
Anthony?
Yeah, can I maybe perhaps give a little more context without
I think you're expanding.
problem?
You're expanding from the motion now.
Well, yeah, but I think a lot of the members don't know why it's become.
You'd have to amend your motion then, Anthony.
Well, I mean, if the board wants to hear what I have to say, I guess you're right, then the board will have to pass the motion. But I do feel it was an equity issue, which is why we're discussing it like this.
Okay, so should we go ahead and vote on whether or not to proceed with this discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
So I'm getting Craig, James, Anthony. Did I miss any other ayes? Opposed?
No.
So Alyssa, Kristen, you're no.
I just don't know what we're talking about. And I feel like if we expand it, we're going to move into a whole thing that I would feel like I'd have to immediately have an opinion. And no.
Can I make a?
I'm just still collecting the votes, James. I just want to make sure I have everybody. Who am I missing? Oh, Flora. Were you a no, Flora? No. Okay. Okay. So the motion failed. 5-3. Okay. So given that, I'm going to open it up to public comment. Is there anyone who would like to make a public comment about the current code of conduct as it is on our agenda? Okay, seeing none. I'm going to close the hearing on the revised code of conduct.
Hey, Meredith. I
Yes.
just received a message from somebody here saying they were trying to raise their hand and were not being answered.
Oh, okay. Who is it from? I don't see any hands raised, but.
It's from John Alloway. I don't know if-
From John, okay.
If people are muted and you're not seeing video, they can't physically raise their hand. Are they unmuted for the purposes of this public hearing?
Well, Aaron Card, do you mind me? Thank you. So John Galloway, did you want to speak on the code of conduct? Are you, Anne Marie, do you have to unmute John Galloway?
I am hitting the unmute. I believe he has to do it on his side.
John, can you unmute yourself? Seems like we're having some technical difficulties here. John, you could try signing off and signing back in quickly. Okay, I really apologize. The last thing I want to do is not allow someone to be able to speak on this, but I'm not exactly sure what we can do.
I think he's back on.
John, are you able to unmute yourself?
I just got a message saying he's dialing in now. John, can you hear us?
Looks like he's connecting to audio. John.
I just had a quick question for you guys. What are we going to do if a teacher happens to call out or they have something to do? Are there going to be like substitute virtual teachers? And like how would that work?
John, you know what? Right now we're having a public hearing on the code of conduct, the revised code of conduct. So I think if you're okay, we can just get in touch with you with an answer to that question.
Okay, no problem.
Okay, thank you so much. Okay, so is there anyone else who would like to make a comment, public comment? Okay, so I'm going to close the public hearing on the revised code of conduct. Can I have a motion to adjourn to executive session to review the employment history of a particular individual and for the purpose of discussing collective bargaining with the Beacon Association of Office Personnel?
So moved.
Second.
I have a question.
Yes, Anthony?
Do we have to vote to close the hearing?
That's a good question. I don't think that we do. I think it's more of a, yeah, I don't think that we do.
In the past, we never have. What happens is the president closes it and then it goes to a roll call vote.
Well, the vote on the code of conduct is actually in the consent agenda tonight, so we don't need to vote on that at all right now. Okay, are there any comments or questions about the motion right now, which is to go to executive session? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 8-0. We'll return in about a half hour. Thank you. Okay. So moving on to item number 6, I just want to review the agenda. We have a few changes. We have an addition to unfinished business, 11.3, correspondence with the City of Beacon and the Town of Fishkill, 12.01, approved tax warrant, we corrected the dates there, and 13.04, instructional personnel, item G has been removed. Are there any questions about that? Moving on to student school presentations. Do we have any? Seeing none, we'll move on to parent groups. Are there any parent groups that would like to speak? Seeing none, superintendent's report, Matt? You're muted.
I hate being that guy. My workshop was really long, so we're just continuing the reopening work. So thank you.
Thanks. Next is committee reports, including board comments. Craig, do you want to speak first?
Yeah, we could consider some advocacy. Can everybody hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Because we've been chatting about this, and I prepared a couple of statements which I sent by email to the board email. If we wanted to take that up tonight, I know it's getting late. We have a few things to do. I'm not sure how urgent it is, but then again, we might not have another meeting before some stuff hits the fan someplace. We just don't know, with a crystal ball being very inaccurate these days, when something might happen at the federal government or at the state level. But the basic idea is to urge the federal officials to do something, please, and then to urge the state officials that if there is no action from the federal government to boost aid to the states, then the states should stand ready to do something within its own resources or options in order to make us whole again. If you look at the report that we had from Anne Marie, you see some of the indications of what happens here. We have a 20% holdback, which is, I think, something like $6 million, which we might never see unless some good news comes down the pike. And I think that calculates to something like about 8% of our total budget. I could be wrong, but it's a big chunk in any event. So if that were to never come to fruition, we have kind of a big hole in the budget, and it might be good for Matt or Anne Marie to give us a reading on what that might look like in a best case scenario and in a worst case scenario. So I don't know if we would put this on the agenda for a discussion, or I don't want to take up the whole board comments just on one topic, but that's kind of where my head's at. What do you think, Meredith?
Let's see if anyone wants to do it for unfinished business. We can see if people want to do it or not. Do you have you have a meeting on Wednesday, right? The PR committee.
We do. Okay.
Thanks. Anthony?
Me?
Yes.
Okay. Nothing to report.
Thanks. James? James, are you there?
He's still on mute.
Yeah, maybe he took a bathroom break. We can come back to him. Anthony White? Anthony White, are you there? Kristen.
Hold on, I'm having technical difficulties.
There, okay.
I have no comments. The curriculum committee hasn't met since our last board meeting. I don't know if Eric has a schedule out of when the curriculum committee is going to meet. I thought that they would possibly meet to discuss the remote or in-person instructional and curriculum piece, and maybe talk about the work that the district is or is planning to do with Dr. Javon Hunter for the social studies. So, Eric, if you're on here, if you have the next curriculum committee, I just need to have prior notice so I can attend.
Yes, Anthony, with the teachers being out for the summer, that's normally those sessions happen during the school year. So as soon as teachers are back in school, I will set one up early in the school year, but I'll talk to you days work for you prior.
Thank you. And Kristen?
We tentatively 7 p.m. on Wednesday. We have a facilities meeting planned. The agenda is pending whether our architect engineering firm will be in attendance. Likely we'll talk about capital project planning and ongoing efforts for planning of the reopening. And Emery, I'll send you an email reminder, but maybe if we can run a report on expenditures related to reopening, that would be helpful to know.
Okay, thank you.
And just wanted to say thank you to the administrators and staff and everybody that's pulling together and trying to make school year and a little bit of some normalcy happen for the kids in our community.
Flora?
I do not have any committee comments. We have the legislative committee having a meeting on the 26th at 8:15, and the wellness committee is not going to be meeting until either late next month or early October. So I'll just limit my comment to thanking Dr. Landau and the administration for all of the really, really hard work you've been doing and the heavy lifting. I appreciate it as a board member, but also as a parent. So thank you.
Thanks, Flora. James, you're back. Do you have comments?
Yeah, sorry, I ran up for a glass of water. Hi. So there's a lot happening. We had our policy committee meeting, which we are reviewing the fruits of that tonight. So that was quite a lot of work. I had my own window into, I think, some of the reopening logistical hurdles. But I'm feeling good about what we have to look at. This last week, I participated, and Meredith was there as well, in an online community forum organized by a local youth group called Beacon for Black Lives. They organized a town hall inviting former students, current students, and members of the BCSD learning community to come talk pretty directly and frankly about their experiences of overt racism, discrimination, and institutional racism in our schools. I've been to a lot of community forums. I think we all have probably the past few months. And I have to say this was one of the most successful, I think, in terms of, I think about for as long as I've been on the board, I think we've all sort of talked around the reality that we realize that we do have some histories of inequity. We do have inequities that exist in our schools. But there's also a challenge to building trust within communities to make people feel safe enough to report them to us, safe enough to step up to the board, safe enough to join the board. And I really feel like this, while it was kind of painful to hear a lot of these stories that people were telling, it was also deeply, deeply moving. And it felt like a gesture towards healing. Was it if you can't talk about it, you can't get better. So I just wanted to report that I felt like it was very productive. It was about 2 hour long. There was maybe around 40 people in attendance. And, you know, it is, there are some hard realities that I think I know we are working on, and some that we will work on, I'm sure, eventually. But I just wanted to say that I wanted to thank the people who showed up to that. I want to thank the people who shared their stories, and certainly thank the young activists for bringing this to my attention and to the district's attention. Yeah, I think that's all I have on that. Those are no further comments. Thank you.
James, is there another policy committee meeting date set?
I'd have to, let me get back to you on that. I will email that out.
Okay, thanks. Alyssa.
I don't have any comments, just a question for Craig. Do we have an agenda for our PRAL meeting on Wednesday evening? Craig?
Might also be getting a glass of water.
Okay.
Can you hear me now?
Oh, there he is.
Oh, there you are.
Somehow I got muted. I had to unmute myself again. So we don't have one yet, but the subject of what we just talked about on the potential advocacy on financial matters. But I did want to ask Matt if we can get Mr. Keeley to talk about the website plans, if that's appropriate at this point. I see Michael is on the call also.
Thank you. That's why I was asking. I think we need to bring that back to the forefront.
Yeah, those basically would be the two items. that
Yeah,
feasible?
I can provide an update with that.
Great.
Okay, good.
I don't have anything else. Thank you.
Thanks, Alyssa. So I have a bunch of little things. Matt and I had a call with Mayor Kiriakou and Anthony Ruggiero last week, a 15-minute call about municipal broadband. And there's not much to report there. It sounds like the city is beginning to think about how that would happen, but very, very, very early stages. But the good news is that Mutual Aid, which I'm not sure if everyone's familiar with, but this is an organization that sprang up out of COVID, has their own digital committee, and they have a smart group of people that have created this plan for booster tents around the city. And I think it's going to be very helpful for our families that have Wi-Fi issues. So I will keep you posted on that. And in general, just I think that they are working on supporting reopening. So they're looking at having outdoor spaces, not necessarily on district property, but families are talking about maybe they could have space if they have a big yard, or if they're at the end of a cul-de-sac, areas to support, places for kids to go. They're also going to be sending out an email looking for volunteers in terms of tutoring, mentoring. This is not going to be district sponsored. They're going to have their own vetting process, and that will be made public by them. But I just wanted people to know, because I do feel like it really is going to take a village to support all of us this year. And I think that they can be an important part of that. I was also on an advocacy call with Sean Patrick Maloney's office. It was helpful to talk. There were two of his aides were there, and a couple other school districts were represented. And the concerns were similar to ours. One of the concerns brought up was liability. Where are we with liability issues in terms of services that kids need that we actually cannot provide sometimes, depending on, if we have to go full remote and things like that. Funding obviously was a big part of it. And they also talked about trying to push for the free lunch waiver that we had in the spring, and how that would make life easier for districts to be able to avoid that paperwork and just feed everybody and not ask questions about it. That hasn't happened yet, so we are trying to spread the word that people need to fill out their free lunch forms if they qualify. What's another thing? I have been in touch with Dutchess Mediation. We have a call set up on September 3rd, 9 a.m. to hear what sorts of work they do with school boards. And in terms of the budget cuts, and I'm calling them budget cuts, I know people are referring them to it as a withholding, but since there is no news about when we might receive that money, and we've been in this position before, I'm just going to refer to them as cuts. And I emailed NYSBA today because there is a process. If the governor makes a cut, there's a process for legislators to respond to the cuts. And if he calls it cuts, it starts a 10-day response process where legislators have an opportunity to offer their own solution to the problem, whether that be different cuts or whether that be sources of revenue. So by calling it withholding, that process has not been triggered. However, I asked NYSBA about this, and they said that at any point, legislators can return and make a response to this. So I do think that it's really important, whether we do it tonight or you guys get it done in the PR committee, that we let legislators know that we understand their power and their responsibility here. And the last thing is that I forwarded you all an email about the Spirit of Beacon Day, which will be more of a car parade, it sounds like, this year. And each organization is allowed one car to drive in this parade. So let me know if you're interested in being that car. Obviously, that's, we couldn't all be in the same car. I don't think that's safe, unless we get like we could use a school bus, I guess. But so please let me know your interest in that. And if not, we can just cheer on the people that do drive. That is all from me.
I like the idea of a school bus.
You like the school bus idea?
I didn't like it until I heard the school bus.
Oh, well, we'll have to see how many people can we fit on a school bus with social distancing.
I like the idea of a school bus too, but I'm afraid of perception of us using a school bus.
Well, just percolate a little bit. We can talk about it at the next board meeting. I'll look at what the deadline is, actually. If we have to register sooner, I'll let you know. Okay, moving on to unfinished business. We have 3 things on the agenda. The first is to adopt the application for Board of Education member, for appointment of the Board of Education member. Did everyone have a chance to look at this? My intention is that we vote to approve it tonight, if after discussion, if need be. So why don't we just start with a motion so that it's in motion?
I'd like to move the adoption of the plan.
Okay.
Anthony, I second.
Anthony saying, so the motion is to adopt the application for Board of Education member. Or do we have comments or questions about it?
Nice work by the ad hoc committee.
Thanks, Craig. Anybody else? Anthony, did you have something?
Yeah, I mean, the reason why there's 2 files is just the first 2 pages are the same. It's just that one's a packet in case somebody asks for a paper copy. They can get it at the district office. For example, they don't have internet or they don't have a printer. Some people don't have printers. But, it's always interesting. So, but if they also don't have internet, the idea was to include all the references that are in the 2-page application to the benefit of who's applying. So that's why it's 2 different versions.
Thanks for putting that together, Anthony. Anybody else? The other thing that came up is just barriers to participation. Why aren't people just like begging to be on the school board? And technology came up as one of the possible barriers, as well as time, as well as, I don't know, were the other barriers that came up?
Those are the big ones.
Yeah, so we want to be conscious of that and see what we can do to make it a more attractive offer. If we approve this tonight, it would go to the 2 papers and then announced on our own website. Was it Anthony White? Do you remember? Was there any other place that we put it out last time?
I think we might put it on NYSBA. They have a website where they could put it on there as well. So it might have been on the NYSBA piece, as well as the Kipsey Journal, Beacon Free Press, and Highland Current.
Okay.
Mira gatito.
Would we post it to the district's like social media accounts or post a notification that it's out there?
That's a great idea.
The only problem with that, of course, is that in the past, only people that have that only goes out to people that have kids in the district. So then it's not, they're getting more notification than other people that may not have kids in the district.
Okay.
Well, anyone can, I mean, Instagram, anyone can follow the district. That's a public account. So
I thought she was talking about like a roll call or something, like a robocall.
I thought you were talking, Alyssa, what was your intention there?
Social media, like
Oh, yeah.
Beacon
I'm
school
fine with
parents.
social media.
Can we post a notification to Beacon school parents, for example, on Facebook and say that application exists and a link to where it is? I mean, we're going to put it on the district website, correct?
I wouldn't do it as individual board members. I would do it as the school sponsored one.
Right. I
Right.
mean, a parent will probably share it from the school Facebook page, but yeah. Okay. Are there any other comments?
I thought you were talking about like doing a robocall for the school, like robocall or something.
Oh, no robocalls.
If we're gonna put it on social media, I think it's a great idea. I just, I do, the last question, the last sentence is like, if you have any questions, concerns, or, just reach out to the board. It would be helpful to know, we talked about obstacles, it would be helpful to know from more people why they would not apply, or that they want to but can't or something. So when we post it on social media, just advertise the interest and definitely encourage people to ask us any questions if they should have any.
I'm sure people will be free to comment. They'll feel very free to comment on the whys and why nots right there on social media post.
Actually, so I mean, I would love to turn that off actually, but
I think that would be a different discussion.
Yeah.
So are there any other comments or questions about the motion on the table? So in that case, I'm going to go for a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, that passes 8-0. Great. The next order of business is an update on the plan for in-person board meetings. Matt, do you want to talk about that?
We were thinking of having the theater at the high school, and we were working on the technology so people can, so the public can interact with the meeting through Zoom or another platform at the meeting, and they don't have to attend in person. We would require social distancing. We would limit the number of people in attendance, but people could also attend. We've just been spending all of our time on the school part. I apologize. So I don't have it all worked out.
That's understandable. I think that, what I wonder if the board is willing to entertain is between Matt and the board officers accepting responsibility to decide whether or not we have those things together, combining our safety protocols that we've developed for students and staff with the technology piece of making sure that the public and other board members that don't feel comfortable coming for whatever reason, making sure that they are still have an equal voice at the meetings.
What are you asking us?
Well, I'm asking whether or not the board would be comfortable agreeing to the things that they would need to have an in-person, like Matt does not have the plan completely written out, and he may not have it written out for several weeks. For me, the priority is definitely on students and staff getting into the buildings safely, and I think that's what's most important to all of the board members. However, I think much of that planning is very similar to the kind of planning that they'll need to do for in-person board meetings. So if he gets that worked out, if we get the technology piece worked out, I'm wondering if the board would entrust Alyssa and me and Matt to make that decision at an agenda setting meeting.
So you're asking the board if we'll vote to approve a plan that's not formed?
I'm asking if if anyone on the board wants to make a motion to entrust the decision to the officers and the superintendent.
I'd like to make a motion to table this until we have a plan.
So there's a motion to table the update on the plan or the, yeah.
Yeah, I second that.
Okay. Are there any comments or questions about this? Yes, Anthony.
Yeah, Meredith. I mean, I appreciate the situation you're in. The wording that you're proposing is a little awkward. I mean, it's not a matter of. I guess it's using the word trust, and that's the right word for it. So I kind of would like more details, and it's not because I don't trust you. Something that you want me to sign on to, but I haven't seen it.
Are there any other comments?
I think this needs a little more development and a little more time, so that's why I'm in favor of tabling it.
I'm not in favor of tabling it because we're asking teachers and staff to be in the buildings, and we're going to be putting kids in the buildings. We're going to all be taking on responsibility to manage risk. And I think as leaders in the district, we shouldn't be, supporting something we're not willing to do ourselves. I know there's been assertions of equity in terms of the technology and what it allows, but I think that, tonight there are a lot of technical glitches and, people who wanted to comment couldn't sign on and comment, and it made it trickier. So I think it does solve it for attendance, but then also there's people who don't have access to technology who would maybe manage risk and come in person. I'm by no means gung-ho or in any way minimizing the risk or anyone's health concerns or anything related to this, because I know how serious it can be. So I'm just saying that we're in a complicated situation, and I'm very personally don't want to table it because we're looking at asking staff to enter the buildings, and I feel like I wouldn't ask somebody to do something I'm not willing to do myself.
Can I ask a question, Meredith?
The other board members comment?
Yeah, I did have a question. I mean, is it safe to assume that, if we move forward with this, if any board member didn't feel like they could attend because they had somebody who is, immune compromised in their family, that their accommodations would be made the same as if they were out of town and they wanted to call in, correct?
Absolutely. And I want to make it clear that I am not asking for this so that I can call the next meeting to be in person. I'm asking for this so that we can take it off of our to-do list. And because I see so much overlap in the prep that our administrators are doing to let our staff and students come to the building safely.
I know you conferred with legal. My understanding was that it also could be a liability issue, that if there was somebody who felt like they were not given notice or was not able to attend, that could actually make the district liable in some way. That was my understanding from your last email, was that they required board approval in order of a plan. So
my last email, and I can quote it for you if you want, it just said that it might take me a second to find it. But my email said that because of the contentiousness of the discussion, the last time we talked about this, that we should not take for granted any board members' opinions about it, and then we should take it to a vote. There were no issues of liability. It was just a matter of having board members' voices heard equally.
So I'm going to comment on a motion that's on the table of tabling it. I'm not in favor of tabling it.
Okay.
I'm also not in favor of tabling it. I think we've been talking around this for weeks, and I think it's time for us to start making some headway.
I agree. I mean, I think if accommodations can be made for a board member who doesn't feel comfortable coming in, then I don't want to table it either.
So are there any other comments or questions? Okay, so the motion that we're voting on is whether or not to table the discussion. This isn't whether or not to go forward with in-person meetings. It is whether or not to table the discussion. All in favor?
Aye.
James, Craig, Anthony. And is there anyone else in favor that I'm missing? So opposed?
No.
Kristen, Alyssa, Laura. So the motion fails 5-3. So go ahead, Anthony.
I would like to amend your motion and to do what Bill said and bring it to a vote and have a motion that the board vote on attending board meetings in person. I'm amending your motion, or if it's not close enough to, we could go on with your motion and then I'll just do a separate motion.
So the motion I asked for was to sort of, I guess, approve the idea of in-person meetings based on the officers and the superintendent deciding that it was safe.
But I think that's broad, Meredith, and that's the point that I was just trying to say. Let's make it black or white to attend the forth with in-person meetings.
Couldn't the motion be to allow the officers and the superintendent to devise a plan?
I don't think that it needs to be a plan, Alyssa. I think that it needs to be a decision that you guys make. I know that there's other districts that's having it. I think that we saw the technology difficulties tonight, not in the public session, but an executive session. And we forget that the purpose of the board meeting is to conduct business of the board. We want the public to be aware of what's happening and to be transparent. We need to be able to conduct the business of the board. And we see that there are limitations in virtual meetings to conduct the full business of the board virtually.
So my only question about your motion, Anthony, is if your motion passes, it seems to me that means that the next meeting will be in person. And I feel that meetings actually will need to be decided meeting by meeting. Is it safe? What are the cases looking like? Did we have, 4 custodians, have to work on something and they can't do the cleaning they need to do that night? Like, I feel like there are a lot of nuances to making that decision. And that's why I wanted to leave it to, it doesn't even have to be me, but to Matt, basically.
I'm fine with the officers and the superintendent making the decision.
So, sorry, Anthony, you have your hand raised?
Yeah, I'm just a little confused. If you can indulge me with some clarification, are you asking that you make the decision, or are you asking that you guys develop the plan? Because that's never really an issue of the 3 of you getting together and developing the plan. Are you asking that you do not come to the board for approval of the plan? I
mean, I'm not sure what you mean when you say a plan. The plan is in my mind, the plan is to follow the regulations and the guidelines that the district has developed for students and staff, and to enter the building safely, plus the technology piece, so that people who cannot attend the meeting safely can still participate. That, to me, that is the plan. So we could approve that, and based on that, it still needs the authority to decide whether or not we are able to stick to the plan each time. That's really what I guess I feel like we need to leave room for.
Does the plan to have public participation with a virtual option for an in-person meeting, does that mean having a Zoom call that would happen concurrent with the in-person meeting?
Yeah, I mean, that some version of that. Yeah. Matt, is that what you and Mike have talked about?
Yeah, I just need to finalize the details, but yeah.
I'd be willing. I mean, I don't need. I've never said that I need things to be so minute, down to the second. But I think not just for myself, but really for anyone in the district who wants to participate, who has been participating. This call right now, I'm looking at, has more people than I think we've seen in most meetings in person. So I just want to make sure that people can. And I think that, in terms of myself, I could trust you, but to people who don't know us personally and don't know the procedures but do want to stay in, I want to make sure that they feel like they can still log in at whatever meeting. So, I mean, I'm not trying to be a stickler. I just want to know what the plan is.
Okay, but that's what I'm saying is that is when we would feel that we could. There's nobody trying to shut down public comment or stop public participation at all. So if we can put those things in motion where we have basically a live stream happening at the same time so that the public could participate and we are able to follow all of the safety measures that we have developed for students and staff to enter our building safely, can we move forward?
But Meredith, I also think that the public comment isn't even a required part of the agenda. So to have that be a part that stifles the in-person meeting is not appropriate. So like if the technology piece isn't set up, it's not a required item on the agenda. Public comment is a local decision that the district makes to have. So to say that if we can't have public comment, that's going to stifle an in-person meeting, I don't think that's fair.
Point.
Okay, well, so I think then I'm at a little bit of, public comment is important to me. So I would like it to be part of the plan because we do have this other thing that's very imperfect in my mind, but it is working to satisfy public comment, which I'll say as someone who went to 2 years of board meetings before getting on the board, that was very important to me. So for me, that is the important part of the plan.
I actually think we're conflating two different things too. We're talking about public comment versus participation. I don't necessarily feel like our public comments have necessarily increased since we've been doing this, maybe via Zoom, maybe a little bit. I also think that we're baking into this an assumption that the interest is directly correlated with the fact that we are doing it via technology. That might be part, but that's not proven. The fact is that I love to think that we're so fascinating and interesting and engaging and people want to follow our every word, but the fact is that people are talking about and teachers are, so parents and teachers are attending these meetings because we're talking about reopening during a pandemic. And so that is the primary interest in, I think, driving attendance. But that's an assumption. I am not saying that as fact by any stretch. I don't think we know all the details. I also think prior to moving to Zoom, we always record the meetings, they're always available for people to access. So public comment should not be driving it, although I agree that public comment is important and I don't want to see that sacrificed at all, whether it is required or not. I think that where untying this knot is essentially people are interested because they want to know what the plan is and what's going on. And so that's why I believe that a lot of people, I agree, I do see some of the same people that we always see, but I also see a lot of staff members on these calls, a lot of staff members and teachers, and then I see parents. So I think that as long as they're able to access the information, that is critical. And I feel like if we're moving towards opening doors, we're going to have to solve a lot of problems ourselves, just like we've all had to figure out how to get groceries and how to navigate this new world. And our children will be doing the same thing in different ways. And Matt has prioritized making sure anybody who is not able to attend in person also feels like they are equally respected and part of the community. I don't think that ethos will be jettisoned as we enter into public in-person board meetings for some people and people doing it remotely. So I feel like I don't know exactly what we're even talking about anymore, except that we have people here, but we also have people who can't be here. We're doing a paper board member application for a reason too, because technology is imperfect. It's a great solution for some. I can say frankly, for myself, this has been much easier for me not to have to finish work, get food for my kids and run out the door. But that's not what's driving me, is my own convenience or anything like that. I just think that if what we're trying to address is, are we going to meet in person? And will we be able to figure that out? And do we trust our leadership to come up with solutions to do that safely? And then once that's achieved, can we put in our own layer of precautions so that we feel like if we're choosing to go in person, that we feel like we're managing the risk the way we do in other ways. That's it. I think that's what, and I'm comfortable with, an extension of what's been planned for our students and staff.
Can I ask one final question? I see Mike Keeley is here with us. Could he speak to the district's sort of like bandwidth and ability to take this on right now? I'm a little worried about overloading our staff. And if the district has the bandwidth and they're prepared to do this, I think I could get behind it.
I think it's up to Matt whether or not he wants to ask Mike to speak on it. But Matt did speak about his conversations with Mike, so that's enough for me. But Matt, it's up to you.
Mike's kind of been doing us a favor by hosting these meetings, and I'm not sure he's available. He kind of gets them started, so I'm not sure he's available. But I will check with him and get back to the board.
And I don't want to miscommunicate what I was saying. I was just saying that the public communication shouldn't be the driving force whether we meet in person or not.
Okay, so is there a motion, or what do we think?
I actually moved for your original motion, but then somebody else spoke and that was recognized. But when you said the motion to trust the leadership to develop procedures to have our board meetings in person, I said so moved.
Okay, sorry, I didn't hear that. So the motion is I think my actual motion was to entrust the leadership to decide when it is safe, that all the, I'm still not saying it quite right, but to determine.
I think, Meredith, if I can offer what my translation of what I think you're saying is, that you and Matt and I will take a look at all the factors involved and make the determination whether or not we can hold the meeting in person on a meeting by meeting basis.
Yeah. So motion that board officers and superintendent will determine whether, this is long, sorry, but whether factors are in place to hold an in-person board meeting.
And then if we decide, yes, we can have an in-person board meeting, then everybody on the board has the option to either come or log in remotely. Is that correct also?
Are you amending the motion, or normally this will be time for a second to the motion?
Right, so let me just repeat the motion that Kristen has moved. Board officers and superintendent will determine whether factors are in place to hold an in-person meeting. Is there a second for that motion?
Second.
Second.
Okay. So this motion has been seconded. Are there comments or questions about it?
My only question or / comment is that my only concern is that no one feels like we're saying you have to come and participate in an in-person board meeting. And I don't think that's what we're saying. I think we're saying if we say, yes, we can have an in-person board meeting, then everybody has the option to opt out of the in-person part and log in remotely. Is that correct?
Absolutely. I mean, every board member will still be allowed to participate and have an equal voice.
Thank you.
Heck, we've had Anthony logging in from down in Washington.
It's true. Yeah. That's worked out pretty well. Are there any other comments or questions? Okay, so I'm going to put this.
I have a question.
Sorry, Anthony, I didn't see you.
So if there's a high risk situation, high risk groups identified by the CDC, I mean, do they still have to divulge their address? It kind of defeats the purpose of that.
Well, currently with the executive order, you don't have to, right? That's what you told me when we discussed this last. I can ask legal about that for this. I'm not sure if that would be a policy, but for now that's protected. Are there any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? James, are you the only one opposed? Is anyone else? Okay, so it passes 7-1. Okay, the next order of business is correspondence with the City of Beacon and the Town of Fishkill. This letter is supposed to basically renew our desire to be considered a person of interest or an agency of interest, party of interest, in terms of development. And there were some comments about it. Do people want to give comments now? You can hear them.
Just for clarification, we were asking to be an interested party because we were worried about the population of the school district, the students in the district, or planning appropriately if there was an increase.
When we first did this, which was a few years ago, it was because there was so much building going on, and this, and we wanted to be part of the seeker process in order to do our own planning about the future population of the district, and the way that they were doing the seeker process was in question. The thing that spurred this again was that Anthony brought up, I think it was you, Anthony, that developers were actually going to planning board meetings saying that they were working with the school district and sort of using that as, as a great thing about them to help make them look better in the eyes of the planning board and make their projects look better. And it seemed that at least the one story I heard was highly exaggerated. And so so that's why there's two parts to the letter. One saying that we want to, we're sort of just renewing our call to be party of interest for that future planning element that I mentioned first. But the second was that we really want the planning board and the city to verify if the developer is saying that they're working with the district, we want them to verify that before, if they have some sort of rubric for their approval process, that that is somehow, not just hearing it from the developer and accepting it as fact.
I had a question about this. Maybe it's a process question, actually. The letters that I've seen are all signed by the superintendent, by Matt. But why? So why are we approving that? Why is it coming to us for approval if the letter is not from us?
Sorry, Anthony, did you have something to say about that?
Yeah. So the Matt is the CEO of the board, so he speaks for us. I mean, if Meredith is the president, but Matt can speak for us as well.
And I did add us as to be notified, actually, because just to have more eyes on it and less of a chance of missing a notification.
Is there, I had asked this in my comments, and I think I understand by the responses, but I understand that we have some legal rights towards notification, and then we have some that maybe a different classification of requests that are not legally binding, but are just kind of what we would like. what we would like for them to consider. Is that correct? That some of these requests that are in there we have a legal obligation? They have a legal obligation to inform us?
Yeah, I think that, I mean, that's where the other thing that we need to talk about, though, I don't think tonight, is like, what is our agenda with the city? What are the topics that are important to us to work out with them? Municipal broadband being one, I think, really obvious one. So this letter was really meant to stick to the, what's going on with the planning board and the development process, in my mind.
Also, in that time, there's been some changes on the planning board, and also there's been staff changes. There's a change in the building inspector, and there's change in president of the planning board since we sent this letter, and I think even staff at City Hall. So it's a good just refresher to say that we are asserting our right as a interested party and seeker as it relates to population, and if there's any properties developed adjacent to any of our buildings, just to put that on the record again for them.
I think that's great. I think the only thing I mentioned this in email, but just to say it in public, that I would love to advocate for the city and the planning board to be a bit more proactive in how they internalize the needs of our learning community in the district. Our extended learning community population is nearly half the population of the city. Our school budget is 3 times the city's budget, and we're by far the largest employer in the city. So, there are some considerations that may not be legally binding, but I think just in a matter of a relationship of good faith, I would certainly love to think that they are taking those into consideration for all the negotiations and the developments. I don't know if that's appropriate to put in this letter per se, but
I don't feel like it is, because I do feel like that's more of a conversation that hopefully will begin and kind of organize over the year. Was there anyone else? Sorry, Anthony, I just want to make sure, am I missing anybody else that wants to speak on this? Go ahead, Anthony.
Yeah, so James, I can appreciate what you're going with that. Unfortunately, planning board, zoning board, there's the New York State property rights. So when they put together an application, the planning board and zoning board, they have some flexibilities in terms of how they impress what the project is going to be, what it looks like. They themselves don't have the legal flexibility to inject things that are not within the owner's rights to build. So it's kind of a slanted way that New York State's property rights are.
Yes, Kristen.
The shorthand for this is basically the mayor has the power to appoint people to municipal boards. If it's something that we, like as citizens, if people say they would like to have some sort of priority placed on people that have direct experience with the school board, with the schools, sorry, not the school board, to be on these boards or some connection, because, a lot of times when we went to meetings, it was very telling that most of the people on the planning board, when we were regularly attending these meetings, didn't have children in the district and didn't really have any connection, not employed by the district, not connected to the district in any way. And so, it's something that we could, as citizens, I don't think it's something that we can assert as a board, but if people were to share with anyone who asks them, like what is something they could do to help the district, they could say, well, let the mayor know that on these boards that it would be helpful to have some voices of people who are connected with the district in some way, as a parent or as a teacher or employed as a staff in some way. But I think that we've had city council members come to our board meetings and say, and people who are still on the city council, that they want to develop an ongoing relationship with and communication with the school. So I think Meredith has been doing that and reaching out and creating a structure for that. I think that's a separate conversation. Maybe something to be taken up at the agenda at Prowl.
I think that would be great. And just in the interest of time, I'm wondering if we want to just vote on the letter as is. I think there's a lot of really good points that have been brought up here, and it definitely is a very important topic. So I don't want to seem like I'm shutting it down, but it's almost 11. So
I'll make a motion. We send out the 3 letters.
okay. Do I have a second for that motion?
I'll second.
Flora, was that you?
Yeah.
Are there comments and questions about that? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, passes 8-0.
Meredith, I have a question.
I'm sorry, Anthony, yes?
So there's a part B to this agenda item, which is agenda for meetings with the city of Beacon. Do we want to table that to the next meeting? Interest of time.
I would vote to table that.
Okay.
You want to make a motion?
I would second that.
Yeah.
So the motion is to table the,
Agenda items for meetings with the city of Beacon.
and that motion's made by Anthony. Do I have a second for that?
Second.
Kristen, comments or questions? If you guys want to take that up at the PR committee meeting, that would be great. And, throw out some suggestions, that'd be awesome. All in favor?
I'll send, we can send emails to Craig, right? Of things that we would like to be included.
Yeah, actually a chair has not been, this will be the first PR committee meeting of the year, so a chair has not been chosen. That's up to you guys to decide, so I would just copy everyone on the committee on it.
Okay.
I'm not on the committee, and I don't know if I could make that night, but I am aware of a couple of projects the city's working on that we may benefit as well. So
Definitely share that if you can, Anthony. Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 8-0. Next order of business is to approve the tax warrant for 2021, and this is a roll call vote. Can I have a motion to approve the tax warrant?
So moved.
Craig, second. Anthony. Are there any comments or questions about this? Anne-Marie, thanks for that presentation. That was really helpful. Kelly, do you want to do a roll call? Or do I do the roll call? Kelly does the roll call, right?
I can do it.
Okay, thanks.
Mr. Caseleau,
He says yes. Easy.
Ms. Flynn,
She said yes also. I don't know if you heard it.
no. Ms. Fiddler,
Yes.
Mr. Singh,
yes.
Mr. White,
Yes.
Mr. Wolf,
Yes.
Ms. Betterbid,
Yes.
Ms. Huer,
Yes.
8-0 in favor.
Great, thank you. Next, we have the consent agenda. We actually have a couple changes there that I should have mentioned earlier. I'm sorry, I forgot. And that is that these policies are actually, they're on here as a first read, but they should be, we're going to need to make a motion to amend it to be the second read and to adopt them, because they need to be approved before the school year begins. So before we move forward, I'm just going to, Anthony, I'm just going to read the consent agenda language, if that's okay with you, and then we can. So that.
In order, Meredith, before you read it,
Yeah.
you might want to amend the 13, 13, 13, 14, 13, 15, the ones that say first read, so then it's not being pulled on the consent.
Oh, and so then we vote them all together.
Well, I was going to offer to just pull them and then make the motion that says something different, that basically waives the first reading.
Either or.
Okay, well, let's do it beforehand, and then maybe we can put it all together. Does that sound okay? So
I make a motion that we amend the agenda items 13, 13, 14, 13, 15, and 13, 16 to waive the first reading in the interest of compliance.
I'll second it.
AW, okay. Are there any comments or questions about the motion to amend these policies for their waiving the first read and moving to second read and adoption? All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? Passes 8-0. Okay, so now the language for the consent agenda. The use of the consent agenda permits the Board of Ed to make more effective use of its time by adopting a single motion to cover those relatively routine matters which are included. Any member of the board who wishes to discuss individually a particular piece of business on the consent agenda may so indicate, and that item will be considered and voted on separately, thus preserving the right of all board members to be heard on any issue. Would anyone like to pull any items from the consent agenda? Okay, seeing none, can I have a motion to approve 13.01 through 13.17?
So moved.
Second.
Laura. Are there any comments and questions or questions? Anthony?
So congratulations and 1308, whoever got the NEA Foundation.
Oh, that's a great grant, yeah. Any other comments or questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 8-0. Okay, we do not need a second executive session, so I'd like a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion.
Second.
Motion made by James, seconded by Alyssa. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Passes 8-0 at 10:59. Thanks so much, everyone. Have a
Good
great
night.
Good night.